Ashok Kumar Agarwal, Academic Counselor, IGNOU. Today we are studying BCC 134, Principles of Macroeconomics, Block 1, Investment Saving, LM Analysis, Unit 1, Equilibrium in the Real Sector. Now, the concept of equilibrium in the real sector forms one of the foundations ideas in macroeconomics. The real sector refers to the part of economy where goods and services are produced, exchanged, and consumed. Equilibrium in this sector is achieved when aggregate demand of goods produced equals aggregate supply. You see, whatever is the demand, that is fulfilled by the supply. Supply is sufficient to meet out the demand, meaning that total demand for goods and services in the economy is equal to the total output produced in the economy. This equilibrium determines the level of national income. National income is the amount of goods and services produced in a country during a particular period. This equilibrium determines the level of national income and output in the economy. In earlier classical thought, economists believed that the monetary sector and the real sector operated independently. Both these sectors operated independently. According to the classical view, changes in money supply, you see, if money supply is reduced or money supply is, you see, increased, it only affected prices, you see, and had no longer effect on real variables such as, you see, production, output, employment, or income. This idea is known as the classical dichotomy. However, Keynes challenged this perspective during the Great Depression. He argued that economies often operate below full employment and that monetary variables can influence real economic activity. According to Keynesian economics, an increase in money supply can reduce the rate of interest. A lower rate of interest encourages firms to invest more because, you see, borrowing becomes cheaper. There will be more factories, there will be more, you see, employment will be, you see, more, and production will also be more. So an increase in money supply can reduce the rate of interest. So a lower rate of interest encourages firms to invest more. They will, you see, businessmen will open more firms. If the rate of interest is, you see, low, if the rate of interest is high, they will not open, you see, new firms. More firms are opened because, you see, borrowing is, you see, cheaper. Increased investment then raises, you see, aggregate demand, and through the multiplier process increases income and output. Thus the real and monetary sectors are interconnected. Interest rates affect investment, investment affects output, output further, you see, influences economic activity. So how they are, you see, interconnected? Interest rates, you see, affect investment, investment affects output, output further influences economic activity. Because of this interdependence, economists such as, you see, J.R. Hicks, Alvin Hansen developed the ISLM framework, which combines equilibrium in the goods market and money market. The goods market is the market where aggregate demand and aggregate supply interact. Equilibrium in this market occurs when planned expenditure, you see, equals output. In Keynesian analysis, equilibrium output was initially determined through the equality between saving and investment. However, the earlier Keynesian model assumed that investment was autonomous, meaning fixed and independent of, interest rates. This assumption simplified analysis but did not accurately reflect reality. In reality, investment decisions are strongly influenced by the rate of interest. If you will get, more, if you're getting more interest, naturally you're going to invest there. Now any company which is, giving you more rate of interest, so part amount you will keep in the bank also, you will invest, and part amount you will invest in that company also, because you will get more interest. Firms generally borrow funds for investment activities such as, purchasing machinery, expanding factories, introducing new technology. Since borrowing involves paying interest, the cost of borrowing directly, affects investment decisions. Both are directly, related. Therefore, to understand equilibrium in the goods market properly, the effect of the effect of interest rates on investment must be incorporated into the analysis. The investment saving curve is used to represent equilibrium in the goods market. Every point on the investment saving curve represents combinations of income and its interest rates, where investment equals saving or where aggregate demand equals aggregate supply. Investment is, inversely related to the rate of interest. This means that when interest rates rise, investment falls, and when interest rates decline, investment increases. The reason behind this inverse relationship lies in borrowing costs. Firms often finance, investments through loans. A higher interest rate increases the cost of borrowing and reduces expected, profits from investment projects. As a result, firm, becomes less willing to invest. Conversely, when interest rates are low, borrowing becomes cheaper and firms are encouraged to undertake more investment projects. See this equation. I represents autonomous investment, which is independent of, interest rate. The term BI represents the interest sensitive component of investment. The parameter B measures the responsiveness or sensitivity of investment to changes in the interest rate. A larger value of B indicates that investment responds strongly to changes in interest rates, whereas a smaller value implies weak responsiveness. Autonomous investment includes expenditure that firms must undertake regardless of, interest rates, such as maintenance, repairs, or replacement of old machinery. The endogenous, component, however, depends upon profitability and financing conditions. This portion fluctuates with changes in interest rates. Graphically, the investment curve slopes downward from left to right. This downward slope reflects the inverse relationship between interest rates and investment. When interest rates decrease, investment, spending rises. When interest rates increase, investment falls. Now here they have, explained by diagram. On the x-axis is the investment, and on the, y-axis is the interest rate. The responsiveness of investment affects the shape of the investment curve. If investment is, highly responsive to interest rates, even a small decline in interest rates causes a large increase in investment. In such a case, the investment curve becomes flatter. On the other hand, if investment, you see, responds weakly to changes in interest rates, the curve becomes steeper. Now here, higher responsive investment, and another figure is, you see, lower responsive investment. In both the figures, you see, investment is on x-axis and rate of interest is on y-axis. Changes in autonomous investment shift the entire investment curve. An increase in autonomous investment shifts the curve rightward because firms invest more at every interest rate. A decrease in autonomous investment shifts the curve leftward. Again, you see, shift in investment curve, you see. On x-axis again is the investment, on y-axis is the interest rate. Aggregate demand refers to the total planned expenditure on goods and services in the economy. It consists of consumption, investment, and government, you see, expenditure. Since investment is now treated as independent on interest rates, aggregate demand also becomes, you see, influenced by interest rates. Aggregate demand equation is, you see, expressed as A bar plus C bar by minus BI. In the equation, A represents autonomous expenditure, C represents the marginal propensity to consume adjusted for taxation, and BI represents the negative effect of interest rates on aggregate demand through investment. An increase in interest rates reduces investment expenditure, which lowers aggregate demand. Conversely, a fall in interest rates increases investment and raises aggregate demand. Thus, changes in interest rates shift the aggregate demand curve. Suppose the economy initially operates at an interest, you see, rate I1. Aggregate demand is determined accordingly and equilibrium output is achieved at Y1. If the interest rate falls to I2, investment increases because borrowing becomes cheaper. The increase in investment shifts the aggregate demand curve upward. As a result, equilibrium output rises from Y1 to Y2. This process demonstrates the transmission mechanism through which monetary changes influence real economic activity. Lower interest rates stimulate, you see, investment, which increases aggregate demand and raises output and income levels in the economy. Now, interest rate and, you see, aggregate demand in this, you see, diagram. This investment, the investment saving curve is derived from the equilibrium condition in the goods market. Since equilibrium, you see, output changes whenever interest rates change. Different combinations of income and interest rates can be plotted to obtain the, you see, investment saving curve. The equilibrium condition is, you see, Y is equal to aggregate demand, AD. Substituting the aggregate demand equation into the condition gives Y is equal to A plus CY minus BI. Rearranging terms gives the IS equation as Y is equal to, you see, alpha G into A minus BI, where alpha G is equal to 1 divided by 1 by C. The investment saving equation shows a negative relationship between interest rates and equilibrium income. A lower interest rate, you see, increases investment and aggregate demand, leading to higher equilibrium output. A higher interest rate reduces investment and lowers equilibrium income. Graphically, the investment saving curve slopes downward from left to right. Every point on the curve represents equilibrium in the goods market where saving equals investment. Now, derivation of the investment saving curve, you see. This is investment, you see, saving curve in this figure. On x-axis is income and output, on y-axis is rate of interest. Not all combinations of income and interest rates represent equilibrium. Points lying off the IS curve indicate disequilibrium in the goods market. Points below and to the left of the investment saving curve represent excess demand for goods. At these points, interest rates are lower than the equilibrium level corresponding to a given income. Lower interest rates stimulate investment excessively, causing aggregate demand to exceed output. This creates upward pressure on interest rates and output. Points above and to the right of the investment saving curve represent excess supply of goods. At these points, interest rates are too high relative to equilibrium. High borrowing costs discourage investment, reducing aggregate demand below output levels. This creates downward pressure on interest rates and output. Thus, the economy naturally tends to move towards points lying on the investment saving curve where goods market, you see, equilibrium exists. Now, points of the investment saving, you see, curve again, income and output on y-axis, on x-axis, and rate of interest on, you see, y-axis. The slope of the investment saving curve measures how much equilibrium income changes in response to a change in the interest rate. Mathematically, the slope is determined by dy divided by di is equal to minus b alpha g. The negative sign confirms the inverse relationship between interest rate and income. The steepness or flatness of the IS curve, investment saving curve, depends on two major factors: the responsiveness of investment to interest rates, and second is the value of the multiplier alpha g. When investment is, you see, highly sensitive to interest rates, a small change in interest rates causes a large change in investment expenditure. This results in a significant shift in aggregate demand and equilibrium income. Consequently, the investment saving curve becomes flatter. When investment is less, you see, sensitive to interest rates, changes in interest rates, you see, produce only small changes in investment and output. In this case, the investment saving curve becomes steeper. The multiplier also affects the slope of the investment saving curve. A higher marginal propensity to consume increases the multiplier effect. This means that any increase in investment causes a larger increase in income. Therefore, a larger, you see, multiplier makes the investment saving curve flatter, because changes in interest rates lead to, you see, larger changes in equilibrium output. Now, slope of the investment saving curve, you see, on x-axis is income and output, on y-axis is aggregate demand. Here, multiplier and the investment saving curve. The position of the investment saving curve depends primarily on autonomous expenditure. Autonomous expenditure includes autonomous consumption, autonomous investment, transfer payments, and government expenditure. Changes in these components shift the investment saving curve. An increase in autonomous expenditure shifts the aggregate demand curve upward. As a result, equilibrium income rises at every interest rate. This causes the investment saving curve to shift rightward. Conversely, a decrease in autonomous expenditure shifts the aggregate demand curve downward and reduces equilibrium income. This causes the investment saving curve to shift leftward. The magnitude of the shift depends on the multiplier effect. The change in equilibrium income is given by delta y is equal to alpha g into delta A. Government spending plays an especially important role in shifting the investment saving curve. An increase in government expenditure raises aggregate demand and shifts the investment saving curve rightward. A reduction in government spending shifts the curve leftward. Similarly, increases in autonomous investment, transfer payments, or autonomous consumption also shift the investment saving curve to the right. Now here in the diagram, we see the position of the investment saving curve. On x-axis is income and output. On y-axis is, you see, in the first figure it is interest aggregate demand. In the second figure it is, you see, interest rate. The study of equilibrium in the real sector explains how income and output are determined in the economy through the interaction of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Unlike classical economies, you see, Keynesian analysis emphasizes that interest rates influence investment, which in turn affects, you see, output and employment. The investment saving curve represents equilibrium in the goods market by showing combinations of interest rates and income levels where investment equals saving. The curve slopes downward because lower interest rates stimulate investment and increase equilibrium output. The slope of the investment saving curve depends on the responsiveness of investment and the size of the multiplier, while its position depends on autonomous expenditure. Understanding the investment saving curve is extremely important because it forms one half of the investment saving and LM framework, liquidity and money supply framework, which explains simultaneous equilibrium in the goods market and money market. It also provides the basis for understanding fiscal policy, monetary policy, and macroeconomic stabilization measures used by governments and central banks. So now in this particular, you see, chapter, we have studied the investment saving curve shows all the combinations of interest rate and national income, you see, where the goods market is in equilibrium. You see, in simple words, goods produced is equal to goods demanded. Goods market is balanced when production is equal to consumption plus investment plus government spending. If demand equals, you see, production, there is no excess stock or shortage, you see. So IS curve, I stands for investment, S stands for saving. In an economic, investment is always equal to saving. When these two become equal, the goods market is in equilibrium. A factory produces, you see, say, goods worth rupees 100 crore. People buy goods worth rupees 100 crore. Everything is sold. So the goods market is in equilibrium. Now suppose banks reduce the interest rate from 8% to 5%. Businesses take more loans. They invest more in factories and machines. More workers are hired. You see, production and income increases. This relationship forms the investment saving curve. Now there is an inverse relationship between interest rate and income. You see, suppose interest rate is 10%. You see, a businessman thinks loan is expensive. I will not open a new factory. Investment falls, income falls. Now interest rate becomes, you see, 5%. He says loan is cheap. Businessman says loan is cheap. You see, he will build the factory. Investment rises, income rises. You see, therefore, lower interest, you see, higher income. Hence, the investment saving curve slopes downward. Now, factors that shift the IS curve. One is increase in government spending. You see, government builds highways, more workers get jobs, cement demand rises, steel demand rises, income increases. The investment saving curve shifts right. Second factor is increase in consumer spending. You see, suppose people receive bonuses during Diwali, they buy, you see, luxury items like TV, bikes, refrigerators. demand increases, income increases, you see investment saving curve shifts towards right. Third point is increases in taxes. Higher taxes, you see, leave people with less money. People spend less. Businesses produce less. Income falls. Investment saving curve shifts towards left. Fourth condition is business confidence. If businesses expect good profits, they invest more. Income rises. Investment saving shifts right. If they fear recession, investment falls. Investment saving curve, you see, shifts towards left. Now, investment, you see, equals saving. Investment saving represents the goods market. Lower interest rates increases investment. Higher investment increases national income. Investment saving curve slopes downward. Now, we come on the next unit, that is equilibrium in the monetary sector. In the first unit, we saw, you see, equilibrium in the real sector. In this unit, we are going to study equilibrium in the monetary sector. Equilibrium in the monetary sector. Now, in macroeconomics, understanding the equilibrium in the goods market alone is not sufficient for explaining how the economy functions. Along with the goods market, the monetary sector or asset market also plays an extremely important role in determining economic activity. The monetary sector deals with money, financial assets, bonds, and the rate of interest. So the monetary sector deals with money, you see, financial assets, then bonds, shares, and the rate of interest. Since investment, consumption, and savings are influenced by monetary conditions, equilibrium in the money market becomes essential for understanding the overall economy. The asset market consists of various forms of wealth held by individuals. For simplicity, economists classify asset into two broad categories: money and interest bearing assets, such as, which are money bearing assets, bonds, you see. Money refers to the cash holdings that provide liquidity, you see, and allow individuals to make, you see, transactions easily. Now, for example, you invest money in bank because, you know, say savings bank account. Whenever you are needing money, you will go to the bank and withdraw. Now, of course, you can withdraw by ATM also. So liquidity is there, you see. So the asset market consists of various forms of wealth held by individuals. For simplicity, economists classify assets into two broad categories: money and interest bearing assets, such as bonds. Money refers to the cash holdings that provide liquidity and allow individuals to make transactions easily. Bonds, on the other hand, you see, provide interest income but are relatively less liquid because they cannot be immediately used for transactions. Now, suppose you invest, you see, in bonds. In the beginning, at the time of investment, only they will give you, you see, checks of interest rates of interest. Suppose you have invested, you see, for at the rate of 10%, they will give you interest checks every month. You can encash those checks if interest is serviced, you see, every month. So bonds provide interest income but are relatively less liquid. Now, maturity, on the date of maturity only, you will get the principal, you see, amount of the bond invested by you. During the period, you see, you will keep on getting the interest, you see. It is not possible to obtain the premature payment, you see. But if you invest in bank, in FD, most of the FDs, except this tax saving FD. Tax saving FDs you can't encash, or senior citizen schemes are there where they are government schemes. You see, money goes to the government. Where you invest for 5 years or 6 years, there you can't get, you see, premature payment. Or If they allow premature payment, then they will, you see, penalty will also be there. So bonds provide interest income but are relatively less liquid because they cannot be immediately used for transactions. They cannot be encashed during the, you see, period. Suppose you have invested, the bond is for 5 years. You see, you cannot get money in between. You will get the principal value of the bond after 5 years, and during these 5 years you will service the interest. Suppose the interest is 10%, so 10%, according to 10%, they will give you the interest. Now, so bonds provide interest income but are relatively less liquid. You see, they cannot be encashed before maturity, date of maturity. They cannot be immediately used for transactions, you see, because they cannot be encashed, so you cannot use them for transactions. Individuals therefore face a choice, you see, between holding wealth in liquid form as money or in interest-bearing forms as bonds. Now, you will need some money for spending. You see, any emergency comes, you should have money. So you will keep some, you see, money in the form of cash or in your saving bank account, also in the bank. That they are demand deposits. You see, whenever you demand, bank will give you money. So a bond is essentially a promise by the borrower to repay money at a future date, along with periodic, you see, interest payments. If a government or corporation issues a bond of rupees 100 and promises to pay rupees 4 annually with repayment after 2 years, the interest rate on the bond is 4%. By holding more bonds, individuals earn greater interest income. However, they sacrifice liquidity because bonds cannot be used directly for purchases. You have to, suppose you invested money in bond for 2 years, you cannot encash it before 2 years. Decisions regarding how wealth is allocated between money and bonds are known as, you see, portfolio decisions. The monetary sector is closely linked to the real sector. Changes in money supply affect interest rates, and interest rates influence investment and output. Therefore, equilibrium in the money market is necessary for achieving overall macroeconomic equilibrium. The liquidity and, you see, money supply curve is used to represent equilibrium in the monetary sector, just as the investment saving curve represents equilibrium in the goods market. So investment saving curve, IS curve, represents equilibrium in the goods market. LM, liquidity and money supply, you see, curve represent equilibrium in the monetary sector. A very important distinction in monetary economics is the difference between nominal demand for money and real demand for money. Nominal demand for money refers to the amount of money people wish to hold in terms of currency, units such as rupees. It is simply the quantity of money demanded without considering changes in, you see, purchasing power or prices. So a very important distinction in monetary economics is the difference between nominal, you see, demand for money and real demand for money. Nominal demand for money refers to the amount of money people wish to hold in terms of currency units such as rupees. It is simply the quantity of, you see, money demanded without considering changes in purchasing power or prices. Real demand for money, however, refers to the purchasing power of money holdings. It measures the quantity of goods and services that money can buy. Real demand for money is obtained by dividing nominal money demand by the price level. Therefore, it reflects the actual value of money in terms of goods and services rather than currency units alone. So, real demand for money, however, refers to the purchasing power of money holdings. It measures the quantity of goods and services that money can buy. Real demand for money is obtained by dividing nominal money demand by the price level. Therefore, it reflects the actual value of money in terms of goods and services rather than currency units alone. If an individual, for example, holds rupees 500 and the price level is rupees 5 per unit of goods, The real demand for money is equal to 100 units of goods. He can buy 100 units of that particular good costing 5 rupees each. If both the nominal money demand and the price level double, the real demand for money remains unchanged because purchasing power remains the same. This shows that real money balances, you see, depend not only on the amount of money held but also on prevailing price level. Real demand for money is also called demand for real balances. An individual's real financial wealth consists of real money balances and real bond holdings. Thus, wealth is divided between money and bonds. If a person decides to hold more money, that is for liquidity, you see, purpose. If suppose he has to go to, you see, he has to spend some money on, you see, treatment, medical expenses, so he should have money so that he may go to the hospital and pay the bills. They must hold, you see, fewer bonds and vice versa. So in that cases, they should have, their liquidity should be intact. They should have, you see, some money, you see, at home, and remaining, you see, they can invest in bonds where they will get, you see, more rate of interest. They can invest in bonds. This, all the investments in, you see, government bonds, very safe, you see. But if you invest in shares, suppose, you see, the share price, you think that it is going to increase, but tomorrow if suppose it falls, you will be in a loss. You cannot say anything. But if you invest in bonds, government bonds, banks FD, post office, you see, deposits. So whatever is your contract, say if bank gives you rate of interest 8%, you have invested the money in the bank for 2 years at 8%. Your principal is going to be intact. Plus the bank is going to give you 8%, you see, rate of interest on the day of maturity. Bank cannot give you less or more. Whatever is the contract, bank is going to give you, you see, that much amount interest. Whereas if you invest the same amount in share market, you cannot say what will happen, you see, after 2 years. It is quite possible that you may make more money than what you will, you see, get by investing in the bank, because share price can increase also. Now we have seen relationship mathematically, you see, by showing that total financial wealth in the economy, is equal to the sum of money balances and bond holdings adjusted for the price level. The analysis demonstrates that if the money market is in equilibrium, then the bond market will also automatically be in equilibrium, because total wealth is distributed between money and bonds. If there is excess demand for money, there must simultaneously be excess supply in the bond market. This occurs because individuals attempt to increase money holdings by selling bonds. Conversely, if there is excess supply of money, individuals, you see, purchase more bonds, creating excess demand in the bond market. Thus, by studying the money market, economists can also understand the behavior of the bond market, how people are investing. Now, individuals demand money primarily for transaction purposes. You see, why we demand money for? We have to do the transactions. Money is required for purchasing goods and services and for carrying out daily economic activities. The amount of cash individuals hold at a given time is known as, you see, money balances. The quantity of goods and services that these balances can purchase represents real balances. The demand for money depends mainly on two factors: income and the interest rate. Higher income increases the demand for money because individuals engage in more transactions. They will spend more, you see, and require greater liquidity. On the other hand, higher interest rates reduce the demand for money because the opportunity cost of, you see, money holding increases. You see, you will make an investment and earn high, you see, interest rate. When individuals hold money, they forego the interest. You see, if suppose hard cash is there with you, say 1 lakh rupees, 50,000 rupees. Now you are foregoing the interest. You see, suppose you would have invested elsewhere, you would have got the interest. But since this hard cash is lying with you, you are not getting the interest. So they forego the interest. They could have, you see, earned by investing in bonds or other financial assets. Therefore, the interest rate represents the opportunity cost of holding money. If interest rate rises, individuals prefer to hold more bonds and less money. If interest rate falls, holding big money becomes relatively less costly, and individuals, you see, increase their, you see, money holdings. They will do less investments and they will keep the money hard cash with them if interest rate is less. The money demand function is, you see, L is equal to KY minus HI. L represents the demand for real balances, Y represents income, and I represents the rate of interest. The parameter K measures the responsiveness of money demand to income, while H, you see, measures the responsiveness of money demand for the interest rate. Both K and H are, you see, they are constants, positive constants. The equation shows that money demand increases with income and decreases with the interest rate. If income rises by 1 rupee, the money demand increases by K units. Similarly, if the interest rate rises by 1%, money demand decreases by H units. The graph, you see, associated with the demand for money illustrates a downward sloping money demand curve. The interest rate is measured on the vertical axis, y-axis, and the quantity of money is measured on the horizontal axis, that is x-axis. The downward slope reflects the inverse relationship between money demand and interest rate. At higher interest rates, individuals hold less money. You see, because remaining money they will invest, they will earn more interest. Individuals hold less money because bonds become more attractive. You see, if interest rates are high, bonds will become more, you see, attractive, because by investing money in bonds by the people, they can earn more, you see, interest. At lower interest rates, individuals hold more money because the opportunity cost of holding cash is smaller. They will not, you see, invest in bonds when the interest rate, you see, is low, because they will earn, you see, low interest. They will get low interest. That is, so they keep the money hard cash with them, you see, ready. Now, on x-axis in this diagram is shown, you see, quantity of money. On y-axis is interest rate. You see, this diagram is demand for money. Unlike, you see, money demand, the supply of money is assumed to be fixed. The central bank, you see, of a country controls the nominal money supply through monetary policy instruments. Each country is having a central bank. In our country, it is the Reserve Bank of India, which controls the, which, you see, makes the monetary policy also. Economists generally, you see, treat money supply as, you see, exogenously determined. If the price level is, you see, assumed constant, the real money supply is obtained by dividing nominal money supply by the price level. So here is the formula. If the price level is, you see, assumed constant, if the price level is constant, the real money supply is obtained by dividing nominal money supply by the price level. Since the nominal money supply is fixed, the real money supply is also fixed under constant, you see, prices. Graphically, the money supply curve is represented by a vertical straight line. The quantity of money is measured on the horizontal axis, while the interest rate is measured on the vertical axis. The vertical nature of the curve indicates that money supply does not depend on the interest rate. Regardless of whether interest rates are high or low, the quantity of money supply remains fixed. Now in this diagram, you see, this is money supply diagram. We have shown on x-axis quantity of money, and y-axis we have shown interest rate. Money market equilibrium occurs when the demand for money equals the supply of money. You see, at equilibrium, individuals are satisfied with the amount of, you see, money they hold, and there is neither excess demand nor excess supply of money. The equilibrium in the money market is determined through the interaction between the downward sloping money demand curve and the vertical money supply curve. The point where the two curves intersect represent equilibrium. At this point, at the point of equilibrium, the interest rate and equilibrium money holdings are determined. Changes in the income shift the demand for, you see, money curve. Suppose income rises from Y1 to Y2, higher income increases transaction needs and therefore increases the demand for money. This shifts the money demand curve down rightward. The associated graph explains this process visually. Initially, the economy is in equilibrium at a lower income and lower interest rate. When income increases, the money demand curve shifts rightward. The new transaction with the fixed money supply curve occurs at a higher interest rate. Thus, higher income is associated with higher interest rate. They both are directly, you see, related. Similarly, when income decreases, money demand falls, you see, because individuals require less liquidity for transactions. The money demand curve shifts leftward, creating excess supply of money. Individuals then attempt to purchase bonds, which pushes interest rates downward until equilibrium is restored. Therefore, lower income levels are associated with lower interest rates. In this diagram, we see, you see, money market equilibrium. Here we see, you see, changes in money market equilibrium. The LM curve, liquidity and, you see, money market curve represents equilibrium in the money market. The letter L and M stand for liquidity preference and money supply respectively. The LM curve shows combinations of income and interest rates at which the demand for real balances equals the supply of real balances. The LM curve is derived from different equilibrium points in the money market. Each equilibrium point corresponds to a specific combination of interest and income. When these combinations are plotted on a graph with income on the horizontal axis and interest rate on the vertical axis, y-axis, they form an upward sloping curve known as the LM curve. The LM curve slopes upward because higher levels of income increase the demand for money, which raises interest rates when money supply is fixed. Thus, income and interest rates are positively related in the money, you see, market. So, income and interest rates are positively, you see, related, directly related in the money market. The graph explaining the LM curve shows, you see, several equilibrium combinations. Connecting these points generates the upward sloping LM curve. Every point on the curve represents equilibrium in the money market. Points lying outside the LM curve indicate disequilibrium. Points above and to the left of the LM curve represent excess supply of money. In such situations, interest rates tend to fall until equilibrium is restored. Points below and to the right of the LM curve represent excess demand for money. Here, interest rate rises to restore equilibrium. The equation of the LM curve is derived by equating money demand and money supply, that is M divided by P is equal to KY minus HI. Rearranging this, I is equal to 1 by H into KY minus M divided by P. This equation shows the positive relationship between income and interest rates. Now here we are having, you see, LM curve. Now slope of the LM curve. The slope of the LM curve measures the changes in the interest rate cost by a change in income. Di divided by dy is equal to k divided by h. The slope depends on two important parameters, that is k and h. The parameter k measures the responsiveness of money demand to income, while h measures the responsiveness of money demand to the interest rates. If money demand responds strongly to income, even small increase in income create large increases in money demand. Since money supply is fixed, interest rates must rise significantly to restore equilibrium. This makes the LM curve steeper. On the other hand, if money demand is, highly responsive to interest rates, individuals adjust their money holdings easily when interest rates change. In this case, even a small increase in the interest rates restore equilibrium after an increase in income. Therefore, the LM curve becomes flatter. Now, we have seen graphically two LM curves with different slopes. One curve is nearly vertical because money demand is relatively insensitive to interest rates. The other is flatter because money demand responds strongly to interest rate changes. So students, we are closing this session. Thank you very much, students.
యూనిట్ ఆహార భద్రత. ఆహార భద్రత యొక్క లక్ష్యాలు. ఈ యూనిట్లో జాతీయ ఆహార భద్రత చట్టం 2013 యొక్క ముఖ్య లక్ష్యం చర్చించడం జరుగుతుంది. భారతదేశంలో ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థను వివరించడం జరుగుతుంది. పీడీఎస్ను అంచనా వేయడం మరియు దాని పరిమితులను అధిగమించడానికి చర్యలను సూచించడం జరుగుతుంది. ఇంట్రడక్షన్, పరిచయం. ఆహారం యొక్క మరియు దానిలోని వైవిధ్యాలు అనేవి ప్రజలు గౌరవప్రదంగా ఆహారం పొందే హక్కును పరిరక్షించే ఒక మానవ హక్కు. దీని అర్థం తగినంత ఆహారం అందుబాటులో ఉండాలి, దానిని పొందే మార్గాలు ప్రజలకు ఉండాలి మరియు అది వ్యక్తి యొక్క పోషకాహార అవసరాలను తగినంతగా తీర్చాలి. ఈ హక్కు ఏప్రిల్ 2020 నాటికి 170 దేశాలు పక్షాలుగా ఉన్న ఆర్థిక, సామాజిక మరియు సాంస్కృతిక హక్కులపై అంతర్జాతీయ ఒడంబడిక నుండి ఉద్భవించింది. ఈ ఒడంబడికపై సంతకం చేసే దేశాలు జాతీయంగా మరియు అంతర్జాతీయంగా తగినంత ఆహార హక్కును పూర్తిగా సాధించడానికి తమలో అందుబాటులో ఉన్న వనరులను గరిష్టంగా ఉపయోగించి క్రమంగా చర్యలు తీసుకోవడానికి అంగీకరిస్తాయి. ఆహార ధాన్యాల సేకరణ. ఆహార ధాన్యాల సేకరణ, నిల్వ మరియు పంపిణీ ప్రయోజనం కోసం ఫుడ్ కార్పొరేషన్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియా FCI 1965లో స్థాపించబడింది. ప్రజలందరూ ఆకలి మరియు పోషకాహార లోపం నుండి విముక్తి పొందేలాగా చూడటం ద్వారా ఇది భారతదేశ ఆహార భద్రతలో ప్రధాన పాత్ర పోషిస్తుంది. జాతీయ ఆహార భద్రతా చట్టం 2013 NFSA 2013 భారత ప్రభుత్వ ప్రస్తుత ఆహార భద్రతా కార్యక్రమాలకు చట్టపరమైన హక్కులను కల్పిస్తుంది. ఇందులో మధ్యాహ్న భోజన పథకం, సమీకృత శిశు అభివృద్ధి సేవల పథకం మరియు ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థ ఉన్నాయి. 2017-18లో లక్షిత ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థ TPDS కింద ఆహార రాయితీలను అందచేయడానికి ₹1500 మిలియన్ల పైగా ప్రభుత్వం మొత్తం వ్యయంలో పెరుగుతుంది. జాతీయ ఆహార భద్రతా చట్టం NFSA 2013 భారత ప్రభుత్వ ప్రస్తుత ఆహార భద్రతా కార్యక్రమాలకు చట్టపరమైన హక్కులను కల్పిస్తుంది. ఇందులో మధ్యాహ్న భోజన పథకం, సమీకృత శిశు అభివృద్ధి సేవల పథకం మరియు ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థ ఉన్నాయి. మధ్యాహ్న భోజనం పథకం మరియు సమీకృత శిశు అభివృద్ధి సేవల పథకం సార్వత్రికమైనవి కాగా, ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థ జనాభాలో సుమారు 3/2 మందికి గ్రామీణ ప్రాంతాల్లో 75% మరియు పట్టణ ప్రాంతాల్లో 50% చేరుతుంది. నిబంధనల ప్రకారం ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థ PDS పబ్లిక్ డిస్ట్రిబ్యూషన్ సిస్టమ్ ఏదైతే ఉందో లబ్ధిదారులు ప్రతి 1% వరకు మరియు పట్టణ ప్రాంత జనాభాలో 64.43% TPDS పరిధిలోకి వస్తారు. వీరికి ప్రతి వ్యక్తికి నెలకు 5 కిలోల సరుకులు ఏకరీతిగా అర్హత ఉంటుంది. అయితే అంత్యోదయ అన్న యోజన కుటుంబాల అత్యంత పేదలుగా ఉన్నందున స్థాయిలో 75% మరియు గ్రామీణ పట్టణ ప్రాంతాలలో 50% కవరేజీకి అనుగుణంగా రాష్ట్రాల వారీగా కవరేజీని కేంద్ర ప్రభుత్వం నిర్ణయిస్తుంది. TPDS కింద రాయితీ ధరలు మరియు వాటి సవరణ. చట్టం అమల్లోకి వచ్చిన తేదీ నుండి 3 సంవత్సరాల కాలం పాటు TPDS కింద ఆహార ధాన్యాలు కిలోకు ₹3.221 చొప్పున బియ్యం, గోధుమలు మరియు ముతక ధాన్యాలకు రాయితీ ధరలకు అందుబాటులో ఉంచబడ్డాయి. ఆ తర్వాత ధరలు కనీస మద్దతు ధర MSPSకు అనుగుణంగా అనుసంధానించబడ్డాయి. గృహాల గుర్తింపు గృహాల గుర్తింపు ప్రతి రాష్ట్రానికి నిర్ధారించబడిన టీపీడీఎస్ పరిధిలో అర్హులైన కుటుంబాలను గుర్తించే రూపాయల కంటే తక్కువ కాకుండా ప్రసూతి ప్రయోజనం పొందేందుకు అర్హులు. మహిళా సాధికారికత మహిళా సాధికారత రేషన్ కార్డులు జారీ చేసే విషయమై 18 సంవత్సరాలు లేదా అంతకంటే ఎక్కువ వయసు ఉన్న కుటుంబంలోని పెద్ద మహిళ కుటుంబ పెద్దగా ఉంటారు. ఫిర్యాదుల పరిష్కార యంత్రాంగం జిల్లా మరియు రాష్ట్ర స్థాయిలో రికార్డులను బహిర్గతం చేయడం, సామాజిక తనిఖీలు నిర్వహించడం, విజిలెన్స్ కమిటీలను ఏర్పాటు చేయడం వంటి వాటికి నిబంధనలు రూపొందించబడ్డాయి. ఆహార భద్రత భత్యం అర్హత కలిగిన ఆహార ధాన్యాలు లేదా భోజనం సరఫరా కాని పక్షంలో అర్హులైన లబ్ధిదారులకు ఆహార భద్రత భత్యం అందించే నిబంధన. పెనాల్టీ అంటే అందించాలి తక్కువ తయారు చేయవచ్చు. ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థ రెండు 113 ప్రధాన దేశాల్లో భారతదేశం 71వ స్థానంలో ఉంది. అందుబాటులో ఉన్న పోషకాహార ప్రమాణం అవసరానికి భారతదేశంలో పిల్లల్లో సుమారు 43% మంది దీర్ఘకాలిక పోషకాహార లోపంతో బాధపడుతున్నారు. 2021 ఆహార భద్రత సూచిక పరంగా 113 ప్రధాన దేశాల్లో భారతదేశం 71వ స్థానంలో ఉంది. అందుబాటులో ఉన్న పోషకాహార ప్రమాణం అవసరానికి 100% ఉన్నప్పటికీ నాణ్యమైన ప్రోటీన్ తీసుకోవడంలో భారతదేశం 20%తో చాలా వెనకబడి ఉంది. సోయాబీన్స్ పప్పుధాన్య శాతంతో చాలా వెనకబడి ఉంది. సోయాబీన్స్ పప్పుధాన్యాలు, మాంసం, గుడ్లు, పాల ఉత్పత్తులు మొదలైన ప్రోటీన్ అధికంగా ఉండే ఆహార ఉత్పత్తులను సరసమైన ధరలకు అందుబాటులో ఉంచడం ద్వారా దీనిని పరిష్కరించాల్సిన అవసరం ఉంది. ఆహార హక్కు విషయంలో భారతదేశం తన ఆదాయ స్థాయికి సాధ్యమైన దానిలో 56.8% మాత్రమే చేస్తుందని మానవ హక్కుల కొలమాన చొరవ హ్యూమన్ రైట్స్ మెజర్మెంట్ ఇన్ఎఫిషియెంట్ కనుగొన్నది. భారతదేశంలోని పేదలకు ఆహార మరియు ఆహారేతర వస్తువులను రాయితీ ధరలకు పంపిణీ చేయడానికి భారత ప్రభుత్వం వినియోగదారుల వ్యవహారాలు, ఆహారం మరియు ప్రజా పంపిణీ మంత్రిత్వ శాఖ ఆధ్వర్యంలో భారత ఆహార భద్రతా వ్యవస్థను ఏర్పాటు చేసింది. దేశవ్యాప్తంగా అనేక రాష్ట్రాల్లో ఏర్పాటు చేయబడిన రేషన్ షాపులు ఫెయిర్ ఫ్రైస్ షాపులను కూడా పిలుస్తారు. నెట్వర్క్స్ ద్వారా గోధుమ, బియ్యం, చక్కెర వంటి ప్రధాన ఆహార ధాన్యాలు మరియు కిరోసిన్ వంటి పీడిఎస్ నిబంధనల ప్రకారం పేదరిక రేఖకు దిగువ ఉన్న కార్డుదారునికి 35 కిలోల ఆహార ధాన్యాలు మరియు పేదరిక రేఖకు ఉన్న మరియు పెద్ద మొత్తంలో కేటాయింపునకు కేంద్ర ప్రభుత్వం బాధ్యత వహించగా ఏర్పాటు చేయబడిన సరసమైన ధరల దుకాణాలు నెట్వర్క్ ద్వారా వాటిని వినియోగదారులకు పంపిణీ చేసే బాధ్యత రాష్ట్ర ప్రభుత్వాలకు ఉంటుంది. పేదరిక రేఖకు దిగువన అంటే బిలో పావర్టీ లైన్కు దిగువ ఉన్న కుటుంబాలను గుర్తించడం మరియు కేటాయించడం, రేషన్ కార్డులను జారీ చేయడం మరియు ఎఫ్పిఎస్ల పనితీరును పర్యవేక్షించడం వంటి కార్యాచరణ బాధ్యతలను కూడా రాష్ట్ర ప్రభుత్వాలే బాధ్యత వహిస్తాయి. ఫెయిర్ ప్రైస్ షాప్, ప్రజా పంపిణీ దుకాణం దీనిని సరసమైన ధరల దుకాణంగా కూడా పిలుస్తారు. ఇది సరసమైన ధరలని కూడా అంటారు. ఇది భారత ప్రభుత్వం ఏర్పాటు చేసిన ప్రజా వ్యవస్థల్లో ఒక భాగం. ఇది పేదలకు రాయితీ ధరలకు రేషన్ పంపిణీ చేస్తుంది. స్థానికంగా వీటిని రేషన్ దుకాణాలు మరియు ప్రజా పంపిణీ దుకాణాలు అని పిలుస్తారు. ఇది ప్రధానంగా గోధుమలు, బియ్యము మరియు చక్కెర ఇష్యూ ప్రైస్ అని పిలువబడే మార్కెట్ ధర కంటే తక్కువ ధరకు అమ్ముతారు. ఇతర నిత్యావసర వస్తువులను కూడా అమ్ముతారు. దేశవ్యాప్తంగా రాష్ట్ర మరియు కేంద్ర ప్రభుత్వాల ఉమ్మడి సహకారంతో నడుస్తాయి. ఈ దుకాణంలో వస్తువులు చాలా చౌకగా లభిస్తాయి. కానీ సగటు నాణ్యతతో ఉంటాయి. ప్రస్తుతం ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థ పబ్లిక్ డిస్ట్రిబ్యూషన్ సిస్టమ్ సగటు వినియోగ స్థాయి నెలకు ఒక వ్యక్తికి కేవలం 1 కిలోగ్రాము మాత్రమే. ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థ పట్టణ ప్రాంతాలకు ఎక్కువ మొగ్గు చూపడం, ఖజానాలో పేద వర్గాలకు సమర్థవంతంగా సేవ చేయడంలో విఫలమవడం వంటి కారణాల వల్ల విమర్శలకు తావిస్తుంది. ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థ పట్టణ ప్రాంతాలకి ఎక్కువ మొగ్గు చూపడం, జనాభాలోని పేద వర్గాలకు సమర్థవంతంగా సేవ చేయడంలో విఫలమవడం వంటి కారణాల వల్ల విమర్శలకు గురైంది. లక్షిత ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థ ఖర్చుతో కూడుకున్నది మరియు తక్కువ అవసరంలో ఉన్నవారిని నుండి పేదలకు చేరువేసిన ప్రక్రియలు కనీస వ్యక్తిలో అది అయితే రేషన్ షాపుల్లో వినియోగదారులకు నాణ్యత లేని ఆహార ధాన్యాలు అందుతున్న సంఘటనలు పెరుగుతున్నాయి. మోసపూరిత డీలర్లు ఫుడ్ కార్పొరేషన్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియా నుండి పొందిన మంచి సరుకులను నాసిరకమైన సరుకులతో మార్చి మంచి నాణ్యత గల సరుకును ప్రైవేట్ దుకాణాలకు అమ్ముతారు. అక్రమంగా సరైన ధరలకు అమ్మే దుకాణాల యజమానులు పోషకమైన ఆహారం చాలా మంది పేదలకు అందుబాటులో లేకుండా పోయి వారు ఆహార అభద్రతకు గురి అవుతున్నారు. వివిధ రాష్ట్రాల్లో నిర్దేశిత హోదా కలిగిన కుటుంబాలను గుర్తించడం మరియు మంజూరు చేయబడిన పీడిఎస్ సేవలను పంపిణీ చేయడం, చాలా రోజుల్లో పాటు పీడిఎస్ సేవలు గుర్తించి మరియు పంపిణీ సమస్యను పరిష్కరించే సవాలును స్వీకరించబడింది. ఉన్నాయి మరియు నిత్యావసర వస్తువుల ధరల స్థిరీకరణ అనే ప్రధాన లక్ష్యం నెరవేరలేదు. కానీ లేదా అనధికార కాలంలో నివసించడం వల్ల కానీ రేషన్ కార్డులను పొందలేకపోతున్నారు. చాలా కుటుంబాలు డబ్బు కోసం తమ రేషన్ కార్డులను తాకట్టు కూడా పెడుతున్నారు. భారతదేశంలో సామాజిక భద్రత కార్యక్రమాల ప్రణాళిక మరియు నిర్మాణం కాదు, దాని పరిణామం మరియు ఆకస్మిక వృద్ధి దేశానికి పెరుగుతున్న జనాభా కోసం మరింత వనరు కాబట్టి యూనిట్ భూమి మరియు నేట భారతదేశ జనాభా యూనిట్ మరియు నీటిపారుదల నీటికి వ్యవసాయ ఉత్పత్తి రేటు కోసం సూచనలు. పీడిఎస్ పబ్లిక్ డిస్ట్రిబ్యూషన్ సిస్టమ్ యొక్క ప్రస్తుత వ్యవస్థను మెరుగుపరచడానికి సంస్థ గ్రామీణ ప్రాంతాల్లో మరిన్ని సరసమైన ధరల వ్యాపారులు లాంటి లాభాపేక్ష కార్డుల ఇటీవల అభివృద్ధి ప్రత్యక్ష నగదు బదిలీలతో పాటు గుర్తింపు సమస్యలు మరియు పీడిఎస్ సేవల పంపిణీ వేదిక అయిన భారతదేశంలో పోషణపై పురోగతిని వేగవంతం చేయడం దీనికి ఏమి అవసరమో విడుదల చేసింది. ప్రారంభ నివేదికను విడుదల చేసింది. వాట్ విల్ టేక్ జాతీయ పోషణ మిషన్ లేదా పోషణ అభియాన్పై 3వ పురోగతి నివేదిక ప్రారంభ నివేదికలు 1 మరియు 2 వరుసగా రాష్ట్రాలు మరియు కేంద్రపాలిత ప్రాంతాల ద్వారా మిషన్ యొక్క సంసిద్ధత మరియు అమలుపై ప్రధానంగా దృష్టి సారించాయి. 2018లో ప్రారంభించబడిన ఇది పిల్లల, గర్భిణీ స్త్రీలు మరియు పాలిచ్చే తల్లుల పోషకాహార ఫలితాలను మెరుగుపరచడానికి భారత ప్రభుత్వం ప్రతిష్టాత్మక కార్యక్రమం వచ్చాయి. 2022 నాటికి కుపోషణ్ ముక్త్ భారత్ లేదా పోషకాహార లోపం లేని భారతదేశాన్ని సాధించాలనే లక్ష్యంతో నీతి రూపొందించిన జాతీయ పోషకాహార వ్యూహం దీనికి మద్దతుగా ఉంది. ఇందుకు కారణం ఏమిటంటే 5 పిల్లల్లో 1/3 కంటే ఎక్కువ మంది ఎదుగుదల లోపం మరియు క్షీణతతో బాధపడుతూ 1 నుండి 4 మంది రక్తహీనతతో బాధపడుతున్నట్టు తేలింది. నివేదిక గురించి అలాగే 2016లో విడుదలైన నేషనల్ ఫ్యామిలీ హెల్త్ సర్వే 4 ప్రకారం గర్భిణీ స్త్రీలు మరియు గర్భిణీ కాని స్త్రీలలో 50% కంటే ఎక్కువ మంది రక్తహీనతతో బాధపడుతూ తేలింది. ఈ నివేదిక గురించి 3వ ప్రగతి నివేదిక అక్టోబర్ 2020 భారీ స్థాయి డేటా సెట్ల ద్వారా క్షేత్రస్థాయిలో అమలు స్థితిని మరియు వివిధ స్థాయిల్లో ఎదురైన అమలు సవాళ్లను సమీక్షిస్తుంది. ఈ యొక్క డేటా సెట్లు NFHS 4 మరియు సమగ్ర జాతీయ పోషకాహార సర్వే CNNS ఈ సమీక్షా నివేదికను మార్చి 2020లో రూపొందించారు. అప్పటి నుండి తీవ్రమవుతున్న పేదరికం మరియు ఆకలి స్థాయిలను ఇది లక్ష్యాలు మిషన్ యొక్క లక్ష్యాలు 1. చిన్నపిల్లలు, మహిళలు మరియు కౌమార బాలికలలో ఎదుగుదల లోపం, పోషకాహార లోపం, రక్తహీనత మరియు తక్కువ జనన బరువులను సంవత్సరానికి వరుసగా 2%, 2%, 3% మరియు 2% తగ్గించడం. దీనికోసం పోషకాహార లోపం సమస్యను ఒక మిషన్ మోడ్లో పరిష్కరించడంపై ఇది దృష్టి పెడుతుంది. దీనికోసం మొత్తం బడ్జెట్లో 50% ప్రపంచ బ్యాంక్ లేదా ఇతర బహుపాక్షిక అభివృద్ధి బ్యాంకుల నుండి వస్తుంది మరియు మిగిలిన 50% కేంద్రం యొక్క బడ్జెట్ మద్దతు ద్వారా సమకూరుతుంది. రెండవది మొత్తం బడ్జెట్లో 50% ప్రపంచ బ్యాంక్ లేదా ఇతర నిష్పత్తితో ఈశాన్యని కేంద్రపాలిత ప్రాంతాలకు యూనియన్ టెరిటరీలకు 100% నిష్పత్తితో విభజించారు. ఆందోళనలు హైలైట్. ఎదుగుదల కోసం స్టంటింగ్ విషయంలో ప్రపంచ ఆరోగ్య సంస్థ WHO నిర్దేశించిన ప్రపంచ ఆరోగ్య తగ్గించాలనేది భారతదేశం యొక్క లక్ష్యం. గర్భిణీ స్త్రీల్లో రక్తహీనత వ్యాప్తిని 2016లో 50.3% నుండి 2022 నాటికి 34.4% మరియు కౌమార బాలికల్లో 2016లో 52.9%, 2022 నాటికి 39.66% తగ్గించాలని లక్ష్యం కూడా పరిగణించబడుతుంది. మహమ్మారి నేపథ్యం అంటే కోవిడ్ మహమ్మారి నేపథ్యంలో తీవ్రమవుతున్న పేదరికం, ఆకలి వంటివి మిషన్ కింద నిర్దేశించిన లక్ష్యాల సాధనను ఆలస్యం చేయవచ్చని నిపుణులు హెచ్చరించారు. ఇక సూచనలు. సమీకృత సప్లిమెంట్లు రెండింటినీ ఉపయోగించి అనుబంధ ఆహారాన్ని మెరుగుపరచడం, ఇతర సామాజిక నిరార్థకాలతో పాటు బాలికలు మరియు మహిళల కోసం పెట్టుబడుల దిశగా బాల్యంలో వివక్షను మెరుగుపరచడం కృషి చేయడం, ఇతర సమర్థవంతమైన చర్యలతో పాటు నీటి సరఫరా, పారిశుద్ధ్యం, డబ్బుతో చేతులు కడుక్కోవడం మరియు పిల్లల మలాన్ని పరిశుభ్రంగా పారవేయడాన్ని మెరుగుపరచడం, వృధాపై తీవ్ర పోషకాహార లోపం చికిత్సకు మించి మధ్యస్థ క్షీణతను కూడా పరిష్కరించే చర్యలను చేర్చడం ద్వారా క్షీణతలో పెద్ద తగ్గుదలకు సాధించే అవకాశం ఉంది. ఇన్ పేషెంట్ సంరక్షణ అవసరమైన వారందరికీ SAM యొక్క సౌకర్య ఆధారిత చికిత్సను అందించేలా విస్తరించడం. జాతీయ స్థాయిలోని పూర్తి వ్యూహాన్ని జాతీయ స్థాయిలో వ్యర్థాల నివారణ మరియు సమీకృత నిర్వహణ కోసం పూర్తి వ్యూహాన్ని తక్షణమే విడుదల చేయాలి. రక్తహీనతపై కేవలం ఆరోగ్య రంగ జోక్యాలపై దృష్టి సారించే విస్తరణ దృష్టాంత ద్వారా పునరుత్పత్తి వయస్సు గల మహిళల్లో రక్తహీనతలో స్వల్ప మెరుగుదలలు సాధించవచ్చు. వయస్సు ఆశాజనకంగా ఉన్నాయి మరియు ఆరోగ్య పోషకాహార సేవలకు కోవిడ్ వాటిని తిరిగి సర్దుబాటు చేయవలసి ఉంటుంది. పోషన్ ప్లస్ వ్యూహానికి త్వరితగతిన మారాల్సిన అవసరం ఉంది. ఈ వ్యూహం మిషన్ యొక్క 4 మూల స్తంభాలైన సాంకేతికత, సమన్వయం, ప్రవర్తన మార్పు మరియు సామర్థ్య నిర్మాణం. అంటే 4 మూల స్తంభాలు ఏంటిది? సాంకేతికత, ప్రతి వ్యవస్థకు సాంకేతికత ఉండాలి. అంటే కంప్యూటర్ ఆధారిత శాస్త్రీయ సాంకేతిక ఆధారాలతో సమన్వయం, ఆ వ్యవస్థలో పనిచేసిన ప్రతి ఒక్కరూ పై స్థాయి నుంచి కింది స్థాయికి సమన్వయం. ప్రవర్తన మార్పు అంటే మోసపూరితము లేకుంటే అడ్డదారులను అనుమడం, అవినీతికి పాల్పడడం మార్పు. సామర్థ్య నిర్మాణం, ఆ వ్యవస్థ యొక్క ICDS పంపిణీ యంత్రాంగాల పాలనా సవాళ్లను పరిష్కరించడంతో పాటు ఇతర సామాజిక నిరర్థకాలపై కూడా కొత్తగా దృష్టి సాధించాల్సిన అవసరం ఉంది. ముగింపు. ఇప్పుడు మీకు ఏం చేశారంటే భారతదేశంలో ఆహార లభ్యత అంత నమ్మదగినదిగా లేదు. రేషన్ దుకాణాల ద్వారా సరఫరా అయ్యే ఆహార ధాన్యాలు పేదల వినియోగ అవసరాలను తీర్చడానికి సరిపోవడం లేదు. ప్రజా పంపిణీ వ్యవస్థ పట్టణ ప్రాంతాలకే ఎక్కువ మొగ్గు చూపుతుందని విమర్శలకు గురైంది. లక్షిత పీడిఎస్ పబ్లిక్ డిస్ట్రిబ్యూషన్ సిస్టమ్ పథకం ఖరీదైనది మరియు తక్కువ అవసరంలో ఉన్న వారి నుండి పేదలను వేరు చేసే ప్రక్రియలో ఇది అధిక అవినీతికి దారితీస్తుంది. రేషన్ దుకాణంలో వినియోగదారులు నాసిరకం ఆహార ధాన్యాలను పొందుతున్న ఉదంతాలు పెరుగుతున్నాయి. డీలర్లు ఫుడ్ కార్పొరేషన్ ఆఫ్ ఇండియా నుండి అందుకున్న మంచి నాణ్యత గల సరుకులు ఇది వాస్తవం. మంచి సరుకులన్నీ కూడా రేషన్ షాపు డీలర్లు ఏం చేస్తారంటే పక్కన ఉన్న కిరాణా షాపులకు వివిధ షాపులకు అందజేసి అవినీతికి పాల్పడుతుందని ఇది వాస్తవం. అయితే ఇక్కడ అక్రమ ప్రైవేట్ దుకాణాలకు అమ్ముకుంటున్నారు ఎవరు? రేషన్ డీలర్లు. అయితే పెద్ద అమ్మకానికి అక్రమ ఫేర్ షాప్ యజమానులు బహిరంగ మార్కెట్లో ఆహార ధాన్యాలను అమ్మడానికి పెద్ద సంఖ్యలో నకిలీ కార్డులను సృష్టించినట్లు కనుగొనబడింది. ఇవన్నీ సురక్షితమైన మరియు పోషక ఆహారాన్ని చాలా మంది పేదలకు అందుబాటులో లేకుండా భరించలేనిదిగా చేసి వారి ఆహార భద్రతకు దారితీస్తాయి. నిర్దేశిత హోదా కలిగిన కుటుంబాలను గుర్తించడం మరియు పీడిఎస్ సేవల ద్వారా పంపిణీ చేయడం వివిధ రాష్ట్రాల్లో చాలా అస్తవ్యస్తంగా మరియు విభిన్నంగా ఉంది. అయితే ఇక్కడ ఏమంటుందంటే పీడిఎస్ పేదరికంతో బాధపడుతున్న సమాజం, ముఖ్యంగా గ్రామీణ పేదల్లో పీడిఎస్ మరియు ఎఫ్పిఎస్ ఉనికి గురించి అవగాహన చాలా తక్కువగా ఉంది. ఒకే కుటుంబానికి కేటాయించిన స్టాక్ను వాయిదాల్లో కొనుగోలు చేయలేరు. భారతదేశంలో సామాజిక భద్రత మరియు రక్షణ కార్యక్రమాల ప్రణాళిక మరియు నిర్మాణంలో స్పష్టత లేకపోవడం వల్ల పేదల కోసం అనేక రక్షణ కార్యక్రమాల ప్రణాళిక మరియు నిర్మాణంలో అస్పష్టత లేకపోవడం వల్ల పేదల కోసం అనేక కార్డులు సృష్టించబడ్డాయి. ఈ రోజున నిన్న మన రాష్ట్రంలో రేషన్ కార్డులను పరిశీలించిన తెలంగాణ రాష్ట్ర ముఖ్యమంత్రి అయిన చంద్రశేఖరరావు, తెలంగాణ రాష్ట్ర ముఖ్యమంత్రి అయిన రేవంత్ రెడ్డి ప్రజలకు స్మార్ట్ కార్డు రేషన్ కార్డులను డిస్ట్రిబ్యూట్ చేశారు. అలాగే వాటి ద్వారా ప్రజలు కార్డును ఎక్కడికంటే తీసుకుపోయి ఏ ప్రాంతంలోనైనా తెలంగాణ రాష్ట్రంలో ఎక్కడైనా కూడా తమ ఆహార ధాన్యాలను పొందవచ్చు ఏ రేషన్ షాప్ నుంచి. అయితే ఒకే కుటుంబానికి కేటాయించిన స్టాకును వాయిదాల్లో కొనుగోలు చేయలేరు. భారతదేశంలో సామాజిక భద్రత మరియు రక్షణ కార్యక్రమాల ప్రణాళిక మరియు నిర్మాణంలో స్పష్టత లేకపోవడం వల్ల పేదల కోసం అనేక కార్డులు సృష్టించబడ్డాయి. దాని పరిమాణం మరియు ఆర్థిక అభివృద్ధి ఉన్న దేశానికి పెరుగుతున్న జనాభా కోసం మరింత ఎక్కువగా ఉత్పత్తి చేయాలనే సవాలు రోజు రోజుకు కష్టతరం అవుతుంది. భారతదేశ జనాభా మొత్తానికి సరిపడా ఆహారం ఉన్నప్పటికీ ఆర్థిక సమస్యల కారణంగా భారతదేశంలోని అనేక కుటుంబాలు మరియు ముఖ్యంగా పిల్లలు ఆహారాన్ని పొందలేకపోతున్నారు. అందువల్ల భారతదేశం అంతటా లక్షలాది మంది పిల్లలు పోషక ఓకే పరిమితులను అధిగమించగల కొన్ని తప్పనిసరిగా అమలు చేయాలి. అంటే తక్కువ ధరలతో వస్తువుల లభ్యం మరియు ఫేర్ ప్రైస్ డీలర్ల దుకాణం ముందున్న ప్రైస్ ధరల పట్టికను లభ్యత పరిణామాన్ని లభ్యత పరిణామాన్ని పరిణామాన్ని లభ్యత పరిణామాన్ని అరుదుగా ప్రదర్శిస్తారు. అంటే చాలా అరుదుగా దేనికి ఎందుకు బియ్యం ఎట్లాగని చాలా షాపుల్లో అదేం మార్చరు. ఏదో ఎప్పుడో ఒకసారి స్టాక్ వచ్చింది ఇంత ఉంది ఏం లేదని అప్పుడప్పుడు వాళ్ళ గుర్తుకొచ్చినప్పుడు మారుస్తూ ఉంటారు. పప్పు ధాన్యాలు ప్రోటీన్‌కు ముఖ్యమైన వనరు కాబట్టి బియ్యం మరియు గోధుమలతో పాటు పప్పు ధాన్యాలు మరియు కాయధాన్యాలను కూడా పీడీఎఫ్ వ్యవస్థల్లో చేర్చాలని చెబుతుంది. అయితే పప్పు ధాన్యాలు ప్రోటీన్‌ను ముఖ్యమైన వనరు కాబట్టి బియ్యం మరియు అయితే పప్పు ధాన్యాలు ప్రోటీన్‌ను ముఖ్యమైన వనరు కాబట్టి బియ్యం మరియు గోధుమలతో పాటు పప్పు ధాన్యాలు మరియు కాయధాన్యాలను కూడా పీడీఎస్ పబ్లిక్ డిస్ట్రిబ్యూషన్ సంస్థ ద్వారా వ్యవస్థలో చేర్చాలని కోరుతుంది. పబ్లిక్ డిస్ట్రిబ్యూషన్ అంటే రేషన్ షాపుల ద్వారా అందించాలని కోరుతుంది. సామాజిక కార్య దీంతో ఈరోజు నా యొక్క ఉపన్యాసాన్ని ఇక్కడే ముగిస్తాను. నమస్కారం.
today's topic of discussion is curriculum and its type, অৰ্থাৎ পাঠ্যক্ৰম, পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ অৰ্থ আৰু পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ প্ৰকাৰসমূহ। যেতিয়া আমি পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ ধাৰণাটো ধৰো, অৰ্থাৎ পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ অৰ্থ বুলি ক'লে মানে মিনিং কাৰিকুলামৰ, তেতিয়া আমি সকলোৱে পাঠ্যক্ৰম বুলি ক'লে কি বুজো যে এইটো এটা, এই শব্দটোৰ লগত আমি প্ৰায়ে আমাৰ স্কুলীয়া জীৱনৰ পৰা আমি পৰিচিত হৈ আছো। আৰু যিমান ধৰণৰ যেনেকে আমি কিণ্ডাৰ গাৰ্ডেনৰ পৰাই হওক বা উচ্চ পৰ্যায়লৈকে হওক, শিক্ষাৰ ব্যৱস্থাৰ ই এক উল্লেখযোগ্য উদযাপন হয়। অৰ্থাৎ আমাৰ এনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ এটা উপাদান হয় যোনটো আমাৰ একদম স্কুলৰ কিণ্ডাৰ গাৰ্ডেনৰ পৰাই ষ্টাৰ্ট হয়। অৰ্থাৎ আমি উচ্চ শিক্ষা প্ৰাপ্ত কৰালৈকে আমাৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰম শব্দটো জড়িত হৈ থাকে। আৰু গোটেই সমগ্ৰ শৈক্ষিক যোনটো আমাৰ প্ৰক্ৰিয়া হয়, অৰ্থাৎ এডুকেশ্যন প্ৰচেছ হয়, তাত আমি মূল যদি প্ৰক্ৰিয়া হিচাপে প্ৰচেছ হিচাপে কয়। আৰু এই পাঠ্যক্ৰম শব্দটোৰ এটা লেটিন শব্দৰ পৰা আহিছে, যাৰ লেটিন ভাষা বুলি ক'লে কাৰাৰ বুজায়। আৰু সেই কাৰাৰ শব্দৰ পৰাই উপাদান হৈছে, যাৰ অৰ্থ হৈছে এটা পথ, অৰ্থাৎ এটা পথৰ পৰা আহিছে। তো এই অবিহনে শিক্ষাৰ যোনটো প্ৰচেষ্টা বা শিক্ষাৰ যোনটো অংশীদাৰ, সেইখিনি কোনো ধৰণৰ আমাৰ শৈক্ষিক লক্ষ্যত যাতে কোনো ধৰণৰ সমস্যা নোহোৱাকে আমি উপনীত হ'ব পাৰো, সেইটোৱে হৈছে এটা পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ অৰ্থ। তো পাঠ্যক্ৰম শব্দটো ক'ৰ পৰা আহিছে, এইটোত আমি জটিলভাৱে যদি এই প্ৰশ্নটোৰ উত্তৰ বিচাৰো, তেতিয়া আমি কওঁ যে এটা লেটিন শব্দৰ পৰা আহিছে। এইটো হৈছে যোনখিনি আমাৰ অভিজ্ঞতা হৈছে বা অভিজ্ঞতা হ'বলৈ গৈ আছে, সেইখিনি আমি সদায় আমাৰ সামৰি লোৱা দেখা যায়। আৰু এই সামৰি লোৱা দেখা যোৱাৰ লগতে আমাৰ এইদৰে এটা অধ্যয়ন কৰিব লাগে, সেই চলাৰ লগত আমি সদায় তুলনামূলকভাৱে গঢ়ি তুলিব আমাৰ যাতে সহজ হয়। এতিয়া পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ যোনখিনি ধাৰণা থাকে, সেইখিনি আমি নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰিবলৈ আমাৰ কিছুমান বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আমাৰ এছপেক্ট আছে। যেনেকে আমি যদি প্ৰথমটো চাওঁ, আমাৰ এইটোতো হৈছে দাৰ্শনিক ভিত্তি, অৰ্থাৎ আমাৰ যিটো ফাৰ্ষ্ট এছপেক্ট হয়, এইটো হৈছে আমাৰ ফিলচফিকেল, অৰ্থাৎ দাৰ্শনিক এছপেক্ট হয়। তো এই ফিলচফিকেল এপ্ৰ'চটো বা দাৰ্শনিক আমাৰ বিষয়ত আমি কিভাৱে উল্লেখ কৰে বা কিভাৱে তাৰ ভূমিকা, অৰ্থাৎ ৰোলটো কি হয়। তো এই ভূমিকাটো আমি জানিবৰ কাৰণে আমি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আমাৰ দৃষ্টিভংগী ভিত্তিৰ ওপৰত চাম, বা বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ সমাজ বিজ্ঞান ভিত্তিৰ ওপৰতো আছে, ছচিয়লজিকেলি বা মানসিক, গোটেইখিনি দৃষ্টিভংগীৰ ওপৰত এই গোটেই পাঠ্যক্ৰমখন ডেভেলপ হৈছে। এতিয়া যদি আমি চাওঁ যে শিক্ষাৰ সমাজ বিজ্ঞান ভিত্তিটোৱে আমাক কি দিয়ে, অৰ্থাৎ আমাৰ যিটো ছচিয়লজিকেল এছপেক্ট হয়, এইটো হয় যে সেই সমাজ বিজ্ঞান ভিত্তিয়ে দাবী জনায়, অৰ্থাৎ কয় যে আমি যিটো সম্প্ৰদায়ৰ পৰা শিক্ষা ব্যৱস্থাৰ ডিজাইন কৰা হৈছে, সেই সম্প্ৰদায়ৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাসমূহ আমি সদায় অকংখাত মনত ৰাখিব লাগিব, আৰু তাৰ লগত এই পদ্ধতি হিচাপে আমি গণ্য কৰোঁ। তো এই পদ্ধতি অকল সমাজ বিজ্ঞানৰ বাবেই নহয়, কিন্তু বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ মানসিক আমি ভেটিটো ল'ব পাৰোঁ। তো এই মানসিক ভেটি কৰা বা পদ্ধতি কেৱল সমাজ বিজ্ঞানৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয় নহয়, কিন্তু শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ প্ৰয়োজন হ'ব পাৰে, আৰু তাৰ লগত বিবেচনাও হ'ব পাৰে। ঠিক তেনেকে ইয়াত শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকলৰ বয়স্ক সদস্য হিচাপে তেওঁলোকৰ ভৱিষ্যতৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাসমূহ আমাৰ বিবেচনা কৰা হয়, আৰু ইয়াৰ বিভিন্ন প্ৰতিফলিত হোৱাৰ লগতে আমি চাওঁ যে যিহেতু পাঠ্যক্ৰম মূল গুৰুত্ব শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ সামগ্ৰিক বিকাশৰ সাফল্যৰ ওপৰত হয়, তেতিয়া ইয়াক আমি সদায় শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ মানসিক প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাবিলাক আমি লগত খাপ খুৱাই গঢ় দিয়া উচিত হয়। অৰ্থাৎ পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ যোনখিনি ধাৰণাসমূহ আছে, সেইখিনি নিৰ্ধাৰণ গৱেষণামূলক অধ্যয়ন ফলাফলত দেখা হৈছে যে ইয়াৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰম গঠনত যথেষ্ট প্ৰভাৱ পৰে। যিহেতু আমাৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ মূল গুৰুত্ব শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ সামগ্ৰিক সাফল্য হয়, সেইখিনি আমি এই সংজ্ঞাসমূহ কি ভিত্তিত হয়, যে বিভিন্ন ক্ষেত্ৰত পাঠ্যক্ৰম শব্দটো লেটিন শব্দ কাৰাৰৰ পৰা আহিছে। ঠিক তেনেকে আমি চাওঁ যে ইয়াৰ পৰা আমাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ উদ্ভৱ হৈছে, যাৰ অৰ্থ হৈছে ৰান, বা ৰানৱেৰ দ্বাৰা অৰ্থাৎ কিয় কৈছে সেইখিনি যে ৰান বুলি কোৱাৰ লগে লগে আমি যদি এটা যিকোনো এটা ভিত্তিত আমি সামৰিব পাৰিছো তেনেহলে আমাৰ সেইখিনি বস্তু আমি বুজিবও পাৰি ঠিক তেনেকে আমাৰ বুজাৰ লগতে আমি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আমি চাব পাৰো আৰু তাৰ লগতে আমাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ তাৰ লগত আমি গম পাৰো ঠিক তেনেকে আমাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ শব্দটো আমাৰ লেটিন শব্দৰ পৰা আহিছে যাৰ উদ্ভৱ হৈছে ৰান বা ৰানৱে অৰ ঠিক তেনেকে পাঠ্যক্ৰম অৰ্থ হ'ল এটা নিৰ্দিষ্ট লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হোৱাৰ বাবে আমাৰ যিমানখিনি চলাবলগীয়া পাঠ্য গণ্য কৰে ঠিক তেনেকে আমাৰ শিক্ষকৰ নিৰ্দেশনাটো শিশুৱে এই পোৱা সকলো অভিজ্ঞতাৰে পাঠ্যক্ৰম গঠিত হয় ঠিক তেনেকে এতিয়া সাধাৰণতে পাঠ্যক্ৰম বিদ্যালয়ৰ আমাৰ তত্ত্বাৱধানত চলে আৰু সেই শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকলক বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পোৱা সকলো অভিজ্ঞতা বুলিও গণ্য কৰা হয় তাৰ লগত পাঠ্যক্ৰমত সেই সকলো অভিজ্ঞতা সন্নিৱিষ্ট কৰা হয় যিবোৰ বিদ্যালয়ৰ শিক্ষাৰ লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হ'বলৈ ব্যৱহাৰ কৰে এতিয়া পাঠ্যক্ৰম হৈছে এজন শিল্পী বা তাত হাতত থকা এটা আহিলা যিটো তেওঁৰ ষ্টুডিঅ'ত অৰ্থাৎ বিদ্যালয়ত তেওঁৰ আদৰ্শ উদ্দেশ্য সেইটো উদ্ভাৱনী কৰি যিমানখিনি নিজৰ সামগ্ৰী বা ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীক গঢ় দিয়ে সেইখিনি মুঠতে পাঠ্যক্ৰম হৈছে শিক্ষাৰ লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হোৱাৰ এক মাধ্যম এতিয়া ইয়াত সেই সকলোবোৰ অভিজ্ঞতা বা কাৰ্যকলাপ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পৰিৱেশত প্ৰভাৱ অন্তৰ্ভুক্ত কৰা হৈছে যিবোৰ ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীসকলে তেওঁলোকৰ শৈক্ষিক দিশটো কেৰিয়াৰৰ সময়ত লাভ কৰে বা বিভিন্ন আকাংক্ষিত লক্ষ্যৰ বাস্তৱায়নৰ বাবেও যুঁজে ঠিক তেনেকৈ কল্পনা কৰি পেলাই তাৰ বিষয়বস্তু বা শিক্ষণৰ সামগ্ৰী শিক্ষণ কৌশল আৰু কাৰ্যকলাপৰ শিকোৱা মূল্যায়ন তাৰ লগত শিক্ষাৰ সকলো দিশৰ লগত পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ ঘনিষ্ঠ সম্পৰ্ক আছে এতিয়া পাঠ্যক্ৰম হৈছে শিক্ষাৰ প্ৰক্ৰিয়াক পথ প্ৰদৰ্শন কৰা পৰিকল্পনা আৰু এই পৰিকল্পনাৰ 4টা গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ উপায় আছে সেই বিষয়বস্তুত আমি যেতিয়া গঠিত হওঁ তেতিয়া আমি সেই বিষয়বস্তুটো কিছুমান ভাবে আমি শিক্ষণৰ সামগ্ৰী হিচাপে গ্ৰহণ কৰিব পাৰো বা তাৰ লগতে আমি কিছুমান আমাৰ কৌশল সেই কৌশলখিনি আমি তৈয়াৰ কৰিব পাৰো এতিয়া ইয়াত এটা যোনটো বস্তু আছে সেইটো হৈছে কাৰিকুলাম ট্ৰানজেকচন অৰ্থাৎ হৈছে পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ লেনদেন তো এই লেনদেনটোৰ পিছত যোনটো আমাৰ লাষ্ট ষ্টেপ হ'ব সেইটো হৈছে ইভালুৱেশ্যন সেইটো হৈছে মূল্যায়ন বুলি যাক কোৱা যায় এতিয়া কি হয় যে শিক্ষাৰ সকলো দিশ গোটেইখিনি আমাৰ প্ৰত্যেকটো পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ প্ৰত্যেকটো ইউনিটৰ তাৰ লগত এটা ঘনিষ্ঠ সম্পৰ্ক থাকে ওৱানৰ লগত টু ডেফিনেট কানেকশ্যন আছে যোনখিনি আমি জেনেৰেলি 1 ইউনিট ক'লে এখন যিকোনো ছাবজেক্ট মেটাৰ এটা আমাৰ বেছিকখিনি থাকে ঠিক তেনেকে সেইখিনি এটা যেতিয়া আমি ডিজাইন কৰা হয় অৰ্থাৎ পাঠ্যক্ৰম হৈছে সেই শিক্ষাৰ এটা প্ৰক্ৰিয়াক আমি কি কৰে যে এটা পথ প্ৰদৰ্শন দেখুৱাই অৰ্থাৎ পথ প্ৰদৰ্শন হৈছে আমাৰ যোনটো আমি পৰিকল্পনাত কৰিছো সেইখিনি এটা আমাক গাইডেন্স দিয়ে তো এই পৰিকল্পনাটোত কি হয় যে আমাৰ 4টা গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ উপাদান হয় প্ৰথমটো হৈছে আমাৰ উদ্দেশ্য অৰ্থাৎ অবজেক্টিভ সেকেন্ডটো হৈছে বিষয়বস্তু বা শিক্ষণৰ সামগ্ৰী অৰ্থাৎ সাবজেক্ট খিনি তাৰপিছত হৈছে শিক্ষণৰ কৌশল অৰ্থাৎ আমাৰ যোনখিনি লাৰ্নিং হয় সেইখিনি আমাৰ যোনখিনি স্কিল অৰ্থাৎ কৌশল টিচিং স্কিলছ বা তাৰ লগত যোনখিনি কাৰ্যকলাপ শিকোৱা হয় সেইখিনি আমাৰ লাষ্ট ষ্টেজটোত আমাৰ ইভালুৱেশ্যন কৰা যায় অৰ্থাৎ মূল্যায়ন কৰা যায় তেনেকে এতিয়া ইয়াৰ লগত আমাৰ যোনখিনি আছে তো সেইখিনি আমি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ এস্পেক্টত আমি চাবলৈ পাৰো আৰু ইয়াৰ লগত আমাৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ গঠিত হৈ পেলাই আমাৰ ইয়াৰ লগত কৰ্মত আমি বুজা সংজ্ঞায়িত কৰো তেতিয়া আমি সেই উদ্দেশ্য লাগিব উদ্দেশ্য বিপৰীত এটা আমি কৌশল আমাৰ এটা স্কিল এটা ডেভেলপ হয় তাৰপিছত তেওঁ কৈছিল যে সেই পাঠ্যক্ৰমে হৈছে বিদ্যালয়ৰ বা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ৰ এটা তত্ত্বাৱধানত য'ত আমি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পদ্ধতিসমূহ আমি বিকশিত কৰোঁ অৰ্থাৎ আমি সেই যোনখিনি আমাৰ অবজেক্টিভ আছে সেইখিনি আমি ডেভেলপ সকলো দিশৰ লগত পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ ঘনিষ্ঠ সম্পৰ্ক আছে আৰু সেই ঘনিষ্ঠ সম্পৰ্কৰ লগত বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰম হৈছে যে এনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ শিক্ষা প্ৰক্ৰিয়াক য'ত পথ প্ৰদৰ্শন পৰিকল্পনা কৰে অৰ্থাৎ পথ প্ৰদৰ্শন পৰিকল্পনা কৰাৰ লগতে এই পৰিকল্পনাৰ 4টা গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ উপাদান আছে এতিয়া 4টা গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ উপাদান হোৱাৰ লগত এটা হৈছে উদ্দেশ্য দ্বিতীয়টো হৈছে বিষয়বস্তু বা শিক্ষণৰ সামগ্ৰীসমূহ ঠিক তেনেকৈ শিক্ষণ কৌশল বা কাৰ্যকলাপৰ শিকোৱা আৰু এইটো লাষ্টটো হৈছিলে মূল্যায়ন তো এই মূল্যায়নৰ যোনখিনি আমি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকলে বৰ্তমান এনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ আমাৰ সমাজৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ তেওঁলোকৰ ভৱিষ্যত তেওঁলোকে লাভ কৰিব পাৰে য'ত আমাৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাসমূহ হিচাপে আমি বিবেচনা কৰিব পাৰো আৰু কি হয় যে ইয়াৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ সাধনৰ বাবে সমাজৰ সাংস্কৃতিক ইতিহাস পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ দ্বাৰা প্ৰতিফলিত হ'ব লাগে এতিয়া পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ বিভিন্ন ধাৰণাসমূহ নিৰ্ধাৰণৰ বাবে আমি শিক্ষাৰ মানসিক যোনখিনি আমাৰ ভেটি আছে সেইখিনি আমি আটাইতকৈ গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ উপাদান দিওঁ আৰু তাৰ লগতে বিভিন্ন আমাৰ গৱেষণামূলক অধ্যয়ন থাকে সেইখিনি আমি তাৰ লগত ফলাফল কৰি আমি দেখুওৱা হয় আৰু এই পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ গঠনত যথেষ্ট প্ৰভাৱ পৰে যিহেতু পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ মূল গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ শিক্ষাৰ্থী আমাৰ সামগ্ৰিক বিকাশৰ ফলত ওপৰত যায় তো গতিকে ইয়াক শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ মানসিক আমাৰ যিমানখিনি প্ৰয়োজনৰ লগত খাপ খুৱাই গঢ় দিয়া উচিত হয় এতিয়া সেই গঢ় দিয়াৰ লগত আমি কেতিয়াবা কি হয় যে শিক্ষা সমাজ বিজ্ঞান ভেটিটোৱে কেতিয়াও দাবী জনায় যে কেতিয়াবা এনেকুৱা হয় যে যিটো সম্প্ৰদায়ৰ বাবে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ শিক্ষা ব্যৱহাৰ কৰা হৈছে ডিজাইন কৰা হৈছে সেইখিনি হৈছে আমাৰ সেই সম্প্ৰদায়ৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাসমূহ আমাৰ বৈজ্ঞানিক সমাজ বিজ্ঞান মানসিক দৃষ্টিভংগীৰ ওপৰত ভিত্তি কৰি হ'ব লাগে আৰু এই অনুসৰি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমত গঢ়ি তুলিব লাগিব আৰু বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমত ধাৰণা নিৰ্ধাৰণ শিক্ষাৰ আমাৰ ভেটি থাকে আৰু সেইবাবে উল্লেখযোগ্য ভূমিকা আমি ল'ব লাগিব তো এইদৰে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ অধ্যয়ন কৰা হৈছে আৰু অধ্যয়নতে আমি পাঠ্যক্ৰমবিলাক আমি কি কৰিব পাৰো যে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ কাৰ্যকৰীবিলাক আমি সংজ্ঞায়িত কৰি পেলাই বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমটো আমি গ্ৰহণযোগ্য কৰিব লাগে আৰু তাৰ ভিতৰতে বিদ্যালয় কি হয় যে বাহিৰত যোনখিনি আয়োজিত বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পাঠদান আছে সেইখিনি সদায় শিক্ষণৰ কাৰ্যকলাপৰ জৰিয়তে আমাৰ এজন শিক্ষাৰ্থীয়ে লাভ কৰা অভিজ্ঞতাৰ সৰ্বমুঠ যিমানখিনি আকাংক্ষিত শৈক্ষিক লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হোৱাৰ সদায় লক্ষ্যবোৰ দাঙি ৰাখিব লাগে তেনেকে অধ্যয়নৰ আমাৰ যোনখিনি পাঠ্যক্ৰম আছে সেইখিনিত আমি শিকিবলগীয়া বহুত বিষয়বস্তু আছে এই বিষয়বস্তুসমূহৰ লগত আমি তালিকা দিয়া যায় য'ত কিছুমান প্ৰধান কাৰ্যকলাপ আমি ইংৰাজীত দিয়া হয় যিবোৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ এটা অংশহে গঠন কৰা হয় সেইকাৰণে যে পাঠ্যক্ৰমক এটা বহল শব্দত আমি যদি চাওঁ তেতিয়া আমি গম পাওঁ যে গণ্য কৰা হিচাপে য'ত অধ্যয়ন থাকে সেইখিনি আমি পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ জৰিয়তে সদায় এজন শিক্ষাৰ্থীক প্ৰদান কৰাৰ লগতে এজন শিক্ষণক অভিজ্ঞতাক সামৰি লোৱা হয় তো এটা শিক্ষা ব্যৱস্থাই নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰা লক্ষ্যত আমাৰ উপনীত হ'বলৈ আমাৰ যিমানখিনি আগবাঢ়ি যাবলগীয়া পথটোৱে হৈছে যে পাঠ্যক্ৰমত শব্দটোৱে সাধাৰণতে কোনো বিষয় পাঠ্যক্ৰম অধ্যয়ন বাবে আমাৰ অনুমোদিত কৰা নাই আৰু সেই হিচাপে বুজা যায় কিন্তু পাঠ্যক্ৰমত এই সংকীৰ্ণ ধাৰণাটোৰ মাজতে আমি সীমাবদ্ধ নহয়, কিন্তু বুজিব লাগিব বা তেওঁলোক কেনেকে বেছিভাগ আকাংক্ষক মনত ৰাখিব লাগে তেনেকুৱা। এই পদ্ধতিত কেৱল সমাজৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাই নহয়, কিন্তু শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাও বিবেচনা কৰা হয়। ঠিক তেনেকে বিবেচনা কৰাৰ লগতে ইয়াৰ উদ্দেশ্য পূৰণৰ বাবে যিকোনো পাঠ্যক্ৰম প্ৰণয়ন কৰা হৈছে, য'ত তেওঁৰ ওপৰত পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ আমাৰ ভীতিসমূহ শিক্ষাৰ দাৰ্শনিক, সমাজ বিজ্ঞান, মানসিক দৃষ্টিভংগীৰ ওপৰত ভিত্তি কৰি হ'ব লাগে। তো পাঠ্যক্ৰম ধাৰণা বা নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰি পেলাই দাৰ্শনিক ভিত্তিৰ যোনখিনি আমাৰ উল্লেখযোগ্য ভূমিকা আছে, সেইখিনিত আমি অধ্যয়নৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমক আমি কাৰ্যকৰীভাৱে আমি সংলিষ্ট কৰিব পাৰোঁ। আৰু এই বিভিন্ন পাঠদানৰ আমাৰ যোনখিনি কাৰ্যকলাপ আছে, সেইখিনি আমি এজন শিক্ষাৰ্থীক লাভ কৰাৰ অভিজ্ঞতাৰ সৰ্বমুঠ আমি শৈক্ষিক লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হোৱাৰ লক্ষ্য আছে। এতিয়া অধ্যয়নৰ আমাৰ যোনখিনি পাঠ্যক্ৰম আছে, সেইখিনি শিকিবলগীয়া বিষয়বস্তুৰ তালিকা দিয়া হয় আৰু কিছুমান প্ৰধান কাৰ্যকলাপৰ আমি কি কৰিব পাৰোঁ যে যিবোৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমত আমি এটা অংশগ্ৰহণ কৰিব পাৰোঁ, সেইখিনি আমাৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ এটা বহল শব্দ হিচাপে আমাৰ গণ্য কৰা হয়, য'ত অধ্যয়নৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰম জৰিয়তে আমি এজন শিক্ষাৰ্থীক প্ৰদান কৰিবলগীয়া যিখিনি শিক্ষণ আছে, সেইখিনি অভিজ্ঞতা সামৰি ল'ব পাৰোঁ যাতে। ঠিক তেনেকে আৰু এই শিক্ষা ব্যৱস্থাই নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰা লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হ'বলৈ আমি আগবাঢ়ি যাবলগীয়া হৈছে। আৰু পাঠ্যক্ৰমত বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ শব্দক আমি সাধাৰণতে কোনো বিশেষ পাঠ্যক্ৰম অধ্যয়ন বাবে অনুমোদিত বিষয়ৰ গোট হিচাপে আমি বুজিবলৈ পাৰোঁ। কিন্তু সেই পাঠ্যক্ৰমত কি হয় যে বুজাবুজি কৰি সংকীৰ্ণ যোনটো ধাৰণা থাকে, সেইখিনি আমি মাজতে সদায় এটা তাৰ লিমিটেশ্যনছ থাকে, সীমাবদ্ধ আছে ডেফিনেটলি। তো সেই অধ্যয়নখিনি আমি কেনেকে এখন টেবলত প্ৰেজেণ্ট কৰিম বা এখন তালিকাত প্ৰেজেণ্ট কৰিম, সেইখিনি কিন্তু সেইখিনি আমি আকাংক্ষিতভাৱে শৈক্ষিক লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হোৱাৰ লক্ষ্য থাকে। ঠিক সেই লক্ষ্য দেখি পেলাই আমি চাওঁ যে ইয়াৰ উদ্দেশ্য পূৰণৰ বাবে যিকোনো পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ প্ৰণয়ন কৰা হৈছে। অৰ্থাৎ আমি মডিফিকেশ্যনো কৰিব পাৰোঁ যদি চেঞ্জেছ লাগে, কাৰণ কি চেঞ্জটো এটা কনষ্টেণ্ট হয়। তো চেঞ্জেছ হৈ থাকিব, তো ছ'চাইটিৰ নিডছৰ মতে সমাজে যোনখিনি পৰিৱৰ্তন ঘটি থাকে, তাৰ নিডছৰ মতে আমি ইয়াৰ উদ্দেশ্য পুনৰ গ্ৰহণ কৰিব পাৰোঁ। আৰু সেই সুস্থ তাৰ ওপৰত ভিত্তি কৰা হ'ব লাগে। আৰু তাৰ দ্বাৰা বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ অনুসৰি যদি আমি চাওঁ যে পাঠ্যক্ৰম কি ধৰণৰ গঢ়ি তুলিব লাগে, এনেকুৱা নহয় যে ৰিপিটেটিভ কণ্টেণ্ট আছে, মানে ৰিপিটেটিভ মানে যদি আমি ইউনিট 2 যোনখিনি আমি ইম্পৰ্টেঞ্চ দিছোঁ, যাতে সেইখিনি আকৌ 4ত যায়ো অলমষ্ট একেই হৈছে। তো সেই যেতিয়া আমি পাঠ্যক্ৰমখন গঠন কৰোঁ, সেইখিনি সময়ত সেই পৰিস্থিতিটোত, সেই ষ্টেজটোত সেইখিনি বস্তু আমি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ গোটেই বিষয়বস্তুটোত যাতে ফুলফিল হৈ যায়। তো সেই পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ ধাৰণাখিনি আমাৰ নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰিবলৈ আমি শিক্ষাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ দাৰ্শনিক ভিত্তিৰ আমাৰ উল্লেখযোগ্য ভূমিকা আছে বুলি কয়। অকল দাৰ্শনিক বুলি নহয়, তাৰ লগত যোনখিনি সমাজ বিজ্ঞান থাকে, মানসিক থাকে বা বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আমাৰ এনেকুৱা হয় যে কেতিয়াবা সম্প্ৰদায়ৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আমাৰ কমিউনিটি বেছড হ'ব লাগিব, বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ বা বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ অধ্যয়নৰ ফলাফলখিনি আমি যাতে পাওঁ। কাৰণ কি অবজেক্টিভছখিনিয়ে যদি ফুলফিল নহয়, তেনেহ'লে আমাৰ সেই কাৰিকুলামৰ কোনো মিনিং নাই। তো গঠনৰ সময়ত আমাৰ যথেষ্ট প্ৰভাৱ পৰিব পাৰে, যিহেতু পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আমাৰ গুৰুত্ব দিয়া যায় আৰু বিভিন্ন শিক্ষাৰ্থীয়ে সদায় সামগ্ৰিকভাৱে বিকাশ হোৱাটো বিচাৰে। অৰ্থাৎ অকল এটা এছপেক্টতে নহয়, কিন্তু অলৰাউণ্ড ডেভেলপমেণ্টত যাতে অলৰাউণ্ড ডেভেলপমেণ্ট হয় বা বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ সাফল্যৰ খোজত আগবাঢ়ি যায়। গতিকে কি হয় যে ইয়াক শিক্ষাৰ্থীয়ে সদায় প্ৰয়োজনৰ লগত আমাৰ খাপ খুৱাই গঢ় দিয়া উচিত হয়। আমাৰ যোনখিনি অলৰাউণ্ড ডেভেলপমেণ্ট, তাত অকল মানে এটা চাইডে দিয়ে নহয়, গোটেইখিনিয়ে বুজায়। তো সেই সমাজৰ আমি চবখিনি যেনেকে আমাৰ প্ৰাপ্তবয়স্ক সদস্য হিচাপেও থাকিব পাৰে, কিছুমান হয়তো এক্সপাৰ্ট, যোনখিনি আমাৰ ৰিটায়াৰ্ড পাৰ্চনেলছ থাকে ৰিলেটেড টু এডুকেশ্যন ফিল্ড, ৰিলেটেড টু মেনেজমেণ্ট বা তেনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ যোন এডমিনিষ্ট্ৰেশ্যনত আছে। তো তেওঁলোকে গঠন কৰা বা এক্সপাৰ্ট কিছুমান এডভাইচ ল'ব পাৰে, যাতে ভৱিষ্যতত যিমানখিনি আমাৰ চেঞ্জেছ লাগে সেইখিনি যাতে আমাৰ খাপ খোৱাত সহায় হয়। আৰু এই সাধনৰ বাবে যোনখিনি আমাৰ সমাজৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ সাংস্কৃতিক ইতিহাস আছে সেইখিনিও আমি আমাৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমত দাঙি ধৰিব লাগিব। এতিয়া সাংস্কৃতিক ইতিহাস বুলি ক'লে আমাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ যোনটো আমাৰ কালচাৰেল এছপেক্ট আছে, ইয়াত আমাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ ফোকল'ৰ হ'ব পাৰে, দেন আমাৰ যোনখিনি ডান্স মিউজিক এইবোৰ আছে, দেন বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আমাৰ পয়েট্ৰি আছে, লিটাৰেচাৰ আছে, এনেকুৱা বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আমাৰ এটচেট্ৰা এটচেট্ৰা। তো এই গোটেইখিনি যোনখিনি আছে আমাৰ যাতে কালচাৰেল এছপেক্টটো যাতে ডেভেলপ হয় আমি পাঠ্যক্ৰমত তেনেকুৱাকৈও আমি হ'ব লাগিব। তেনেকৈ এতিয়া বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আমাৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমত কি হয় যে আমাৰ লেটেষ্ট যোনখিনি আমাৰ ইম্পৰ্টেণ্ট বিশাল ব্যক্তি বা তেওঁৰ খুব বেছি উপাদান আছে আমাৰ কমিউনিটি, তো তেখেতৰো আমি যোনখিনি জীৱনশীলা লাগে তেওঁক আমি এই বিব্লিঅ'গ্ৰাফী বা তেওঁৰ কথা আমি ধুনীয়াকৈ আমাৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমত এড কৰিব পাৰোঁ, যাতে আহিবলগীয়া প্ৰজন্মখিনি যাতে তেওঁ কোন হয় চিনি পায়। ঠিক তেনেকৈ ধৰণৰ আমাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ সেই অধ্যয়নসমূহ আমি কৰিব লাগিব, আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ ফলাফলত আমি বিভিন্ন পাঠ্যক্ৰম গঠনত যথেষ্ট আমাৰ প্ৰভাৱ পৰা দেখা যায়। আৰু যিহেতু সেই পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ মূল গুৰুত্ব হৈছে কি যে শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ সামগ্ৰিক বিকাশ আৰু তাৰ লগত সাফল্যৰ ওপৰত আমাৰ, গতিকে ইয়াক শিক্ষাৰ্থীক মানসিক প্ৰয়োজনৰ লগত আমাক খাপ খুৱাই গঢ় দিয়া উচিত বুলি কৈছে। এতিয়া পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ সংজ্ঞা বুলি ক'লে আমি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ, আমি যদি পদ্ধতিগতভাৱে চাওঁ তেতিয়া এইটো হৈছে যে পাঠ্যক্ৰম শব্দটো মই অলৰেডি কৈছোঁ যে লেটিন শব্দ যোনটো কাৰাৰ তাৰ পৰা আহিছে, আৰু যাৰ অৰ্থ হৈছে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ ৰাণ বা ৰাণৱে বা এটা দৌৰা। তো এইদৰে পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ অৰ্থ হ'ল এক নিৰ্দিষ্ট লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হোৱাৰ বাবে চলাবলগীয়া পাঠ্যক্ৰম তেওঁক কয়। আৰু এইটো হয় যে কিছুমানে ইয়াক আকৌ সংকীৰ্ণ পৰিসৰৰ সৈতে সংজ্ঞায়িত কৰা যায়, আনহাতে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ কিছুমান এনেকুৱা বহুত বহল অৰ্থত সংজ্ঞায়িত কৰা হৈছে। তো যোনটো ব্ৰুচ জয়ছ আৰু মাৰ্চৱেলৰ ডেফিনিশ্যন হয়, তেওঁলোকে কৈছিলে কি যে এটা শৈক্ষিক কাৰ্যসূচী চাবলৈ বুলি ক'লে বৰ্ণনা কৰিছিলে। তেওঁ কৈছিল যে শিক্ষকৰ যোনটো আমাৰ নিৰ্দেশনা থাকে, সেই নিৰ্দেশনাত সদায় শিশুৱে পোৱা সকলো অভিজ্ঞতাৰে পাঠ্যক্ৰম গঠিত কৰে। যোনখিনি লাৰ্ণিং এক্সপিৰিয়েঞ্চেছ থাকে, সেই লাৰ্ণিং এক্সপিৰিয়েঞ্চেছৰ পৰা যোনখিনি এক্সপিৰিয়েঞ্চ লাভ কৰে সেইখিনি দিয়ে আমি পাঠ্যক্ৰমখন সদায় বনাওঁ। এতিয়া কি হয় যে সাধাৰণতে পাঠ্যক্ৰমক আমি বিদ্যালয়ৰ তত্ত্বাৱধানত চাওঁ। এখন বিদ্যালয়ৰ তত্ত্বাৱধানত সদায় মানে অথৰিটি মানে আণ্ডাৰ দ্য ছুপাৰভিজন আৰু। তো বিদ্যালয়ৰ তত্ত্বাৱধানত সদায় আমি শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকলে পোৱা সকলো যোনখিনি আমাৰ অভিজ্ঞতা থাকে সেইখিনি আমি সেই অভিজ্ঞতাবিলাক গণ্য কৰা হয়। এইখন ৰনাল্ড ওল্ড তেওঁ কৈছিলে 1965-ত। তো এই তাৰপিছত বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ কেচুৱেল এণ্ড কম্পেয়াৰৰ তেওঁ কৈছিলে 1935-ত। তো তেওঁৰ মতে কৈছিল যে শিক্ষকৰ নিৰ্দেশনাত শিশুৱে পোৱা সকলো অভিজ্ঞতাৰে আমি পাঠ্যক্ৰম বুলি কওঁ। তো আল্টিমেটলি আমি এটা কমন ৱাৰ্ড যে লাৰ্ণিং এক্সপিৰিয়েঞ্চেছ। তো এতিয়া সেই সাধাৰণতে পাঠ্যক্ৰমক আমি বিভিন্ন বিদ্যালয়ৰ তত্ত্বাৱধানত আমি শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকলক বা সকলো অভিজ্ঞতা বুলি আমি গণ্য কৰোঁ। যোনটো মিনিং বুলি ক'লে আমি পাঠ্যক্ৰমত এই সকলো অভিজ্ঞতা সন্নিৱিষ্ট কৰা হয় যিবোৰ বিদ্যালয়ৰ এটা শিক্ষাৰ লগত উপনীত হ'বলৈ আমাৰ ব্যৱহাৰ কৰে এতিয়া কেইটামান ফেক্টৰছ বা কেইটামান মেটাফৰ হিচাপে ইউজ কৰিছে আমি কম্পেৰিজন যেনেকে পাঠ্যক্ৰম হৈছে এজন শিল্পী ঠিক আছে এজন আৰ্টিষ্ট আৰু সেই মানে শিল্পীজন কোন হয় আৰ্টিষ্টজন হৈছে শিক্ষক ঠিক আছে তো সেই শিক্ষকৰ হাতত থকা এটা যোনটো আহিলা বুলি কয় সেইটো হৈছে যিয়ে তেওঁ এখন ষ্টুডিঅ' লাগিব অবভিয়াছলি আৰ্টিষ্ট যেতিয়া পেইণ্ট কৰে বা গান গায় তো সেই এখন ষ্টুডিঅ' লাগিব আৰু সেই ষ্টুডিঅ'টোৱে হৈছে আমাৰ বিদ্যালয় স্কুলছ আৰু তেওঁৰ যোনখিনি আদৰ্শ থাকে উদ্দেশ্য সেই আদৰ্শখিনি হৈছে তেওঁৰ উদ্দেশ্য এই অনুসৰি নিজৰ সামগ্ৰী ইয়াতে সামগ্ৰী কি হ'ব ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰী যেনেকে গঢ় দিয়ে সেইখিনিকে তেওঁ পাঠ্যক্ৰম বুলি কৈছে মুঠতে ক'ব পাৰি যে পাঠ্যক্ৰম হৈছে শিক্ষাৰ লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হোৱাৰ এক মাধ্যম ঠিক আছে ইটছ এ means of fulfilling objectives ইয়াত সেই সকলো অভিজ্ঞতা কাৰ্যকলাপৰ আৰু পৰিৱেশৰ প্ৰভাৱ অন্তৰ্ভুক্ত কৰা হৈছে যিবোৰ ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীয়ে তেওঁলোকক শৈক্ষিক আমাৰ কেৰিয়াৰৰ বাবে সময়ত লাভ কৰে আৰু বিভিন্ন আকাংক্ষিতভাৱে লক্ষ্যৰ ব্যৱস্থাপনাৰ বাবে তেওঁলোকে চায় তো আৰু এটা হৈছে হিল্ডা টাৱা ডেফিনিশ্যন হিল্ডা টাৱাই কৈছে যে পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ সংজ্ঞা দিয়া হৈছিলে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পৰিকল্পনা বা লিখিত নথি হিচাপে য'ত আকাংক্ষিত লক্ষ্য বা উদ্দেশ্যত আমাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ উপনীত হোৱা কৌশল আৰু অন্তৰ্ভুক্ত কৰা হয় এতিয়া চেতনা আৰু চেতনা এই দুজন তেওঁ 2007ত কৈছিলে যে পাঠ্যক্ৰমত হৈছে বিদ্যালয়ৰ এটা তত্ত্বাৱধানত পদ্ধতিগতভাৱে বিকশিত কৰা এক জ্ঞান ঠিক আছে আৰু সেই অভিজ্ঞতাৰ কোডৰ গঠনৰ বাবে শিক্ষাৰ্থীয়ে আমাৰ জ্ঞান আৰু অভিজ্ঞতাৰ ওপৰত নিজৰ নিয়ন্ত্ৰণ বৃদ্ধি কৰিব পাৰে যেটো কৈছো মূল্যায়ন তো মূল্যায়নৰ লগত আমাৰ যোনটো বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ ডেৰাইভেশ্যন ৱৰ্ডটো আৰু কেনেকুৱা ধাৰণাসমূহ সেইখিনি আমি এই ধাৰণাৰ বাবে শিক্ষাৰ মানসিক যোনটো আমাৰ ভেটি আছে সেইটো আটাইতকৈ গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ ভেটি বুলি কৈছে এতিয়া ইয়াৰ পদ্ধতি কেৱল সমাজৰ পৰাই নহয় কিন্তু প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাও নহয় কিন্তু শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ আমি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ বিবেচনাও কৰা হোৱা দেখা পাইছে তো এনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমত আমাৰ ভেটিসমূহ শিক্ষাৰ দাৰ্শনিক বা বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ সমাজ বিজ্ঞানৰ বা মানসিক দৃষ্টিভংগীৰ ওপৰত আমি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ ভিত্তি কৰি হ'বলগীয়া দ্বাৰা এই অনুসৰি আমি পাঠ্যক্ৰমত গঢ়ি তুলিব পাৰোঁ তো পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ এক ধাৰণা যোনটো নিৰ্ধাৰণত আমাৰ শিক্ষাৰ দাৰ্শনিক ভেটিৰ উল্লেখযোগ্য ভূমিকা থকা দেখা যায় তো এইদৰে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ অধ্যয়ন হৈছে বা পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ অৰ্থ বুজোৱা হৈছে কিন্তু এই পাঠ্যক্ৰমক কাৰ্যসূচীভাৱে সংযোজিত কৰিব পাৰি যে সেই পাঠ্যক্ৰমটোৱে আচলতে কিমানখিনি গ্ৰহণ কৰি সেইখিনি সময়তে বিদ্যালয়ৰ ভিতৰত আৰু বাহিৰত আয়োজিত বিভিন্ন পাঠদান শিক্ষণ কাৰ্যকলাপ জৰিয়তে কৰিব পৰা হৈছে আৰু শিক্ষাৰ্থীয়ে লাভ কৰা অভিজ্ঞতাসমূহ সৰ্বমুঠতে কিমানখিনি শৈক্ষিক লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হোৱা দেখা যায় ঠিক তেনেকৈ এই পাঠ্যক্ৰমটোৱে গ্ৰহণ কৰাৰ সময়ত বিদ্যালয়ৰ ভিতৰত আৰু বাহিৰত আয়োজিত বিভিন্ন পাঠদান শিক্ষণ আমাৰ কাৰ্যকলাপৰ জৰিয়তে আমি এজন শিক্ষাৰ্থীয়ে লাভ কৰিব পাৰোঁ ঠিক তেনেকৈ আকাংক্ষিতভাৱে তেওঁক এই লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হোৱা দেখা যায় ইয়াৰ উদ্দেশ্য হৈছে যে যিকোনো পাঠ্যক্ৰম আমি প্ৰণয়ন কৰা হৈছে সেই ভেটিৰ ওপৰত ভিত্তি কৰি হ'বলগীয়া বা পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ ভিত্তিসমূহ শিক্ষাৰ দাৰ্শনিক বা বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ সমাজ বিজ্ঞান আৰু মানসিক দৃষ্টিভংগীৰ ওপৰত ভিত্তি কৰিবলগীয়া অনুসাৰে পাঠ্যক্ৰম গঢ়ি তুলিব পাৰি আৰু তাৰ লগত পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ ধাৰণা নিৰ্ধাৰণত শিক্ষাৰ দাৰ্শনিক ভিত্তিৰ উল্লেখযোগ্য ভূমিকা আছে। শিক্ষাৰ সমাজ বিজ্ঞান ভিত্তিয়ে এইটো কয় যে সম্প্ৰদায়ৰ বাবে শিক্ষাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ ব্যস্ততাৰ আমাৰ ডিজাইন কৰা হয় আৰু সেই সম্প্ৰদায়ৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাসমূহ আমি বিভিন্ন আকাংক্ষিকভাৱে মনত ৰাখিবলগীয়া হয় আৰু এই পদ্ধতিত কেৱল সমাজৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাই নহয় কিন্তু শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাসমূহো দেখা যায়। তো বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ দৃষ্টিভংগীত বা বিভিন্ন প্ৰণয়ন কৰিবলগীয়া যোনখিনি আমাৰ আবেদন থাকে সেইখিনি সেই ধাৰণতে আমি উল্লেখ কৰিব পাৰোঁ আৰু কিণ্ডাৰগাৰ্টেনত এতিয়া আমাক জেনেৰেলি ক্লাছ 1ৰ পৰা 5ৰ যোনখন চিলেবাছ থাকে সেইখন আমাৰ ক্ৰমান্বয়ভাৱে 6ত ডিফিকাল্টি লেভেলটো অলপ বাঢ়ি যায়, 7ত তাতছে বেছি, 8ত বেছি। তো এনেকুৱা যিমান আপাৰ ক্লাছ গৈ থাকে আমাৰ যেতিয়া আমাৰ এনেও আণ্ডাৰষ্টেণ্ডিংটো বাঢ়ি গৈ থাকে সেই দ্বাৰা আমি গঠন কৰিব লাগে আৰু এনেকুৱা নহয় যে যোনটো মই বাৰে বাৰে কৈছোঁ যে যোনখিনি আমাৰ প্ৰেক্টিকেল লাইফত বা ডে টু ডে আমাৰ প্ৰেক্টিকেল ডেইলি লাইফত যোনখিনি টপিক এটা কিছুমান আমি এনেকৈ ভাবোঁ যে সেই টপিকবোৰ আমি স্কুলত এনেই পঢ়িলোঁ এতিয়া আমাৰ ব্যৱহাৰ নহয়, কিন্তু যেনেকৈ কিছুমান মেথমেটিকেল কেলকুলেশ্যন ইভেন ডেইলি লাইফতে হৈ থাকে একচেপ্ট কিছুমান কনচেপ্ট যেনেকৈ প্ৰায়খিনিয়ে হয় কেলকুলেশ্যনছ, কিন্তু যোনবোৰ আমি ছায়েন্সৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ বিজ্ঞানৰ আমি বস্তু পঢ়িছিলোঁ বা আমাৰ যোনখিনি আমাৰ হিউমেন বডিৰ যোনটো মৰ্ফলজি হয় আমি এইবিলাক পঢ়িছিলোঁ, তো তাৰ গোটেইখিনি আমি বস্তু ইভেন আমি এতিয়াও সেই বস্তুবোৰ আমি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ সময়ত আমাৰ অধ্যয়ন কৰিবলগীয়া হয়। তো এটা চিষ্টেমেটিক অৰ্ডাৰত যেনেকুৱাকৈ পঢ়িছিলোঁ ঠিক তেনেকুৱাকৈ কাৰ্যকৰীভাৱে আমি সংজ্ঞায়িত কৰিবও পৰা যায় আৰু সেই বিদ্যালয়ৰ ভিতৰত আমি বাহিৰতো আয়োজিত বিভিন্ন পাঠদান আৰু শিক্ষণৰ কাৰ্যকলাপৰ জৰিয়তে আমি এজন শিক্ষাৰ্থীয়ে লাভ কৰা অভিজ্ঞতাবিলাক আমি সৰ্বমুঠতে কৰিব পাৰোঁ। তো এই অধ্যয়নৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমত শিকিবলগীয়া বিভিন্ন বিষয় এটা বহল শব্দ হিচাপে আমি গণ্য কৰা হয় আৰু তাৰ লগতে এই জৰিয়তে এজন শিক্ষাৰ্থীক আমি কিমানখিনি কি প্ৰদান কৰিব লাগিব অভিজ্ঞতা সেইখিনি ইয়াতে সামৰি লোৱা হয়। কিন্তু এটা কথা যে পাঠ্যক্ৰম সংকীৰ্ণ ধাৰণা হয় আৰু ইয়াৰ মাজতে সীমাবদ্ধ নহয় আৰু বহুত আছে আমি কাৰিকুলাম ট্ৰেনজেকশ্যন পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ লেনদেন বা পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ বিভিন্ন টাইপছ আমি সেইখিনি গোটেইখিনি আমি পঢ়িব লাগিব বা বহুতখিনি আছে যেনেকৈ নীড বেছড টাইপ হ'ব পাৰে বা কমিউনিটি বেছড এনেকুৱা বহুতখিনি আছে, সেইখিনি পঢ়ি গ'লে ক্ৰমান্বয়ভাৱে আমি আৰু শিকিব পাৰিম। কিন্তু ইয়াত যোনটো আমাৰ সেই ধাৰণা আছে সেইখিনি আমি মূল হিচাপে আমি তাৰ এইখিনি অবিহনে আমি কাৰিকুলামৰ বেছিকখিনি নজনাকৈ আমি আগৰ থিয়ৰিজখিনি পঢ়ি বুজি নাপাওঁ। তো ঠিক সেইকাৰণে এই অংশীদাৰ হ'বলৈ কোনো ধৰণৰ শৈক্ষিক লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হ'ব পৰা নাযায় আৰু তাৰ লগত আমাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ কিণ্ডাৰগাৰ্টেন আমি বা তাৰ পৰা আমি পৰ্যায়ক সেই পৰ্যায়ত আমি উচ্চ শিক্ষা ব্যৱস্থাত আমি দেখিবলৈ পাওঁ। তো উল্লেখযোগ্য উপাদান কৰি এই শৈক্ষিক প্ৰক্ৰিয়াৰ মূল অবিহনে আমি অংশীদাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আমি কোনো শৈক্ষিক লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হ'ব নোৱাৰোঁ। তো এইখিনি যোনখিনি ধাৰণা আছে সেইখিনি আমি যদি চাওঁ যে উদ্দেশ্য পূৰণৰ হিচাপে যিকোনো পাঠ্যক্ৰম আমাৰ কেতিয়াও প্ৰণয়ন কৰা হৈছে বা এটা সুস্থ ওপৰত ভিত্তিত কৰি হ'ব লাগিব, অৰ্থাৎ বেছটো ভাল হ'ব লাগিব আৰু তাৰ লগত বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ দৃষ্টিভংগী দেখা যায়। এতিয়া সেই পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ যোনখিনি নিৰ্ধাৰণ কৰা মই ক'লো দাৰ্শনিক হ'ব পাৰে, মানসিক হ'ব পাৰে, সামাজিক হ'ব পাৰে, সেই ভিত্তিসমূহ আমি গোটেইখিনি যাতে উল্লেখযোগ্য কৰোঁ। নহ'লে কি হয় যে বিবেচনা কৰাৰ সময়ত আমাৰ সেইখিনি দিগদাৰ হয়। তো সেইটো কাৰণে ব্যৱহাৰ কৰা বা কেনেকুৱা আমাৰ কাৰিকুলাম ডিজাইন বুলিও এটা কনচেপ্ট আছে, সেই কাৰিকুলাম ডিজাইনত আমি গম পাম যে কেনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ আমি বস্তু, আমি কেনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ বিষয়বস্তুৰ লগত জড়িত হ'লে আমি কেনেকুৱাকে পঢ়িব পাৰোঁ। আৰু তাৰ লগত আমাৰ কিছুমান যেনেকে BEd কৰিলে বা DLED কৰিলে আমাৰ কিছুমান এনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ এছাইনমেণ্ট থাকে, সেই এছাইনমেণ্ট বিলাকত আমাক কাৰিকুলাম ডিজাইন কৰিব দিয়ে যে ফৰ ক্লাছ 2 ফৰ ক্লাছ 3 এখন কাৰিকুলাম ডিজাইন কৰিব লাগে বা এখন চিলেবাছ ৰেডি কৰিব লাগে। সেইটো এটা হৈছে এছাইনমেণ্ট। তো তেনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ আমি যদি প্ৰেক্টিকেলি কৰি চাওঁ তেতিয়াহ'লে আমি বুজি পাম। তো ইয়াৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ মানসিক বা এছাইনমেণ্ট থাকে 50 মাৰ্কছ বা 80 মাৰ্কছ তেনেকুৱা। তো তাত আমি নিজে যেতিয়া কৰি চাওঁ তেতিয়া গম পাওঁ। তো ইয়াৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰম আমাৰ গঠনত সময় যথেষ্ট সেইকাৰণে গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ প্ৰভাৱ পেলায় বুলি কয়। আৰু যিহেতু পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ মূল গুৰুত্ব হৈছে শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ সামগ্ৰিক বিকাশ বা সাফল্যৰ ওপৰত হয়, সাফল্য হ'ব লাগিব। সেইখিনি অকল কাৰিকুলাম সফল হ'লেই নহ'ব, কিন্তু সাফল্য পাব লাগিব। আৰু গতিকে ইয়াৰ শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ মানসিক প্ৰয়োজনসমূহ আমাৰ প্ৰয়োজন হয়। তো ঠিক তেনেকে এই লগত খাপ খুৱাই গঢ় দিয়া উচিত হয়। আৰু তাৰ লগতে আমাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ যেনেকে আমাৰ শব্দ, এইবোৰ আমি নিৰ্দিষ্ট লক্ষ্যত আমি চলাবলগীয়া পাঠ্যক্ৰম হ'ব পাৰে। আৰু সেই শব্দটোত বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ সংজ্ঞায়িত কৰা হৈছে যে কিছুমান ইয়াক সংকীৰ্ণভাৱে পৰিসৰৰ সৈতে সংযোজিত কৰা হয়, আনহাতে কিছুমানে বহুত বহল অৰ্থত কৰিছে। এতিয়া আমি সংকীৰ্ণভাৱেও কৰিব লাগিব, পঢ়িব লাগিব, আৰু বহলভাৱেও পঢ়িব লাগিব। অৰ্থাৎ এটা নেৰ' মিনিং আৰু ৱাইড মিনিং আছে। এই দুটাই আমাৰ গুৰুত্বৰ পৰীক্ষাত হয়তো 3 আৰু 2 মাৰ্কছ আহিব পাৰে, 5 মাৰ্কছৰ কুৱেশ্যন। তো তেনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ। আৰু এই ডেফিনিশ্যনটো আমাৰ সংকীৰ্ণভাৱে আৰু বহলভাৱে ডেফিনিশ্যন কেইটা হৈছে যোনকেইটা ডেফিনিশ্যন আমাৰ হিল্ডা টাৱাই দিছিলে, আৰু হিল্ডা টাৱাৰ লগতে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ ৰোনাল্ড এণ্ড মেকলেৰ তেওঁ পুট কৰিছিলে মেটাফৰ ইউজ কৰি। সেইটো আমাৰ 3 মাৰ্কছ মানে অলমষ্ট 2 মাৰ্কছৰ কেতিয়াবা সংজ্ঞা কিছুমান সুধি দিয়ে। তো আমি সেইখিনি সংজ্ঞাখিনি জনাটো বহুত দৰকাৰী হয়। আৰু এই গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ যোনকেইটা উপাদান আছিলে সেইকেইটা আমি উদ্দেশ্যত পৰিণত হিচাপে কৰিব লাগিব। আৰু সেই সামগ্ৰীৰ কৌশলখিনি আমি জানিব লাগিব। আৰু কৌশলৰ লগতে আমাৰ ইভালুৱেশ্যনটো খুবেই ইম্পৰ্টেণ্ট। নহ'লে মূল্যায়ন যদি নহয় তেনেহ'লে আমি গম নাপাওঁ যে ল'ৰা ছোৱালীয়ে আচলতে কিমানখিনি বুজি পাইছে। তো সেইকাৰণে ইভালুৱেশ্যন কৰিব লাগিব। এখন ট্ৰানজেকশ্যন কাৰিকুলাম প্ৰস্তুতি কৰি পেলাই তাতে কিমানখিনি ইফেক্টিভ হৈছে সেইখিনি জানিবৰ কাৰণে আমি পৰীক্ষা পাতিব লাগিব, বা বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ এছাইনমেণ্টছ হ'ব পাৰে, প্ৰজেক্ট বেছ হ'ব পাৰে। তো এই গোটেইখিনি থাকে। তো সেই শিক্ষণৰ কৌশল আমি কাৰ্যকলাপ আমাৰ লিখিবলৈ পোৱা যায়। তো পাঠ্যক্ৰমত এই সকলোবোৰ আমাৰ অভিজ্ঞতা সন্নিৱিষ্ট কৰা হয়, আৰু যিবোৰ বিদ্যালয় শিক্ষাৰ লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হ'বলৈ আমি ব্যৱহাৰ কৰা যায়। তো সেই ব্যৱহাৰ কৰাৰ লগতে আমাৰ যোনখিনি সামগ্ৰী বা অন্তৰ্ভুক্ত কৰি ৰাখিব লাগে সেইখিনি সদায় ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীসকলক তেওঁলোকৰ শৈক্ষিক দিশটো আগুৱাই লৈ যায়। তেওঁলোকৰ কেৰিয়াৰ যেতিয়া সময়ত লাভ কৰা হয়, তো সেই বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আকাংক্ষিত লক্ষ্যৰ আমাৰ বাস্তৱায়নৰ বাবে গুৰুত্ব দিয়ে। তো বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰম হৈছে বিদ্যালয়ৰ তত্ত্বাৱধানত পৰা জ্ঞান আৰু অভিজ্ঞতা পুনৰ্গঠন, যাতে শিক্ষাৰ্থীয়ে জ্ঞান আৰু অভিজ্ঞতাৰ ওপৰত নিজৰ ৰাখিব পাৰে। তো সেইকাৰণে সকলো দিশৰ পৰা লগত পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ আমাৰ এটা ঘনিষ্ঠ সম্পৰ্ক আছে। আৰু তাৰ লগত পাঠ্যক্ৰম আমি শিক্ষাৰ প্ৰক্ৰিয়াক এটা পথ প্ৰদৰ্শন পৰিকল্পনা বুলি কওঁ। অৰ্থাৎ পথ প্ৰদৰ্শন পৰিকল্পনা বুলি ক'লে কি বুজে, যে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ বিষয়বস্তু বা শিক্ষণৰ সামগ্ৰী আমি কিভাৱে দিম, বা শিক্ষণৰ যোনখিনি আমাৰ কৌশল হয় সেই কৌশলখিনি আমি কেনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ আমাৰ লেনদেন থাকিব, সেইখিনি আমি একচুৱেল ক্লাছৰুম চিটুৱেশ্যনত আমি এপ্লাই কৰি চাব লাগিব। সেইখিনিৰ ওপৰত কৈছে। আৰু তাৰ লগত আমাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ ডেৰাইভেশ্যন ক'ৰ পৰা উপনীত হ'ল এনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ সংকীৰ্ণ পৰিসৰ অৰ্থাৎ ইয়াৰ পিছত নেক্সটখিনি যোনখিনি আমি পঢ়াম নেক্সট ক্লাছত সেইখিনি হৈছে স্কোপ থাকিব তাতে যে এই কাৰিকুলাম ট্ৰানজেকশ্যনৰ স্কোপটো কিমান হয় বা কেনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ আমি কৰিব পাৰোঁ তো সেই কিছুমান ইয়াক এনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ বহল মিনিং আমি যিখিনি এতিয়া আজি যোনখিনি পঢ়িছোঁ সেইখিনি আমি নেৰো মিনিং আৰু ইয়াতে ব্ৰডাৰ এছপেক্টটো আছে তো সেই ব্ৰডাৰ এছপেক্টৰ লগত আমি গৱেষণামূলক মানে যোনখিনি ৰিচাৰ্চ বেছড আছে যোনখিনি আমি অলৰেডি ল'ৰা ছোৱালীৰ লগত আমি ইউজ মানে কৰিছোঁ বা তাৰ লগত আমি ইভালুৱেশ্যনত ৰিজাল্ট পাইছোঁ সেইখিনি আমি পাঠ্যক্ৰম গঠনত আমি কি কৰিম ব্যৱহাৰ কৰিম তো সেই পাঠ্যক্ৰম হৈছে মূল গুৰুত্ব দিয়া এটা শিক্ষাৰ্থী এটা সামগ্ৰিক বিকাশ বুলি ক'ব পাৰি আৰু তাৰ লগত বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ সাফল্যৰ ওপৰত ইয়াক এটা নতুন গঢ় দিয়াত সহায় কৰে আৰু প্ৰয়োজন অনুসাৰে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ যোনখিনি আমাৰ সামাজিক যোনখিনি পৰিৱৰ্তন আছে সেই পৰিৱৰ্তন অনুসৰি বিভিন্ন সময়ত এইখিনি keeps on changing তো এই পদ্ধতিত কেৱল অকল সমাজৰে নহয় প্ৰয়োজনীয়তা নহয় কিন্তু শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাও বিবেচনা কৰা হয় তো গোটেইখিনি পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ যোনখিনি আমাৰ আধাৰটো যোনখিনি সেইখিনি আমি গম পালোঁ যে ইয়াত আমাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ মিনিং থাকে ধাৰণা বুলি ক'লে মিনিং থাকিব য'ৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ মিনিংটো হৈছে পাঠ্যক্ৰম শব্দটোৰ লগত পৰিচিত ইয়াত কিণ্ডাৰগাৰ্টেনৰ পৰা আমি কি কৰোঁ যে একদম হায়াৰ লেভেললৈকে আমাৰ প্ৰত্যেকটো শিক্ষা ব্যৱস্থাত এক উল্লেখযোগ্য উপাদান থাকে আৰু এই সমগ্ৰ শৈক্ষিক প্ৰক্ৰিয়াৰ মূল আৰু পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ অবিহনে একো ধৰণৰ শিক্ষা আমাৰ কেতিয়াও তাৰ কোনো শৈক্ষিক লক্ষ্যত উপনীত হ'ব নোৱাৰে তো পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ যোনটো আমাৰ লেটিন ৱৰ্ড ডেৰিভেশ্যন সেইখিনি ডিছকাছ কৰিছোঁ কিন্তু এই পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ যোনখিনি আমাৰ বুজাবুজি থাকে আণ্ডাৰষ্টেণ্ডিং সেইখিনি কিন্তু আমাৰ সংকীৰ্ণ ধাৰণাৰ মাজত সীমাবদ্ধ নহয় আমি যোনখিনি ব্ৰডাৰ মিনিং সেইখিনি আমি নেক্সট ক্লাছত পঢ়িম তাৰ লগত পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ শব্দটো সাধাৰণতে কেনেকুৱা ধৰণৰ অধ্যয়নৰ পৰা আহিছে সেইখিনি আমি ডিছকাছ কৰিছোঁ অধ্যয়নৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমত শিকিবলগীয়া বিষয়বস্তু তালিকা দিয়া হয় আৰু কিছুমান প্ৰধান কাৰ্যকলাপো দিয়া হয় ঠিক তেনেকৈ সেইবোৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমত এটা অংশহে গঠন কৰা হয় ঠিক তেনেকৈ সেই পাঠ্যক্ৰমক এটা বহল শব্দত হিচাপে গণ্য কৰা হয় য'ত অধ্যয়নৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰম জৰিয়তে এজন শিক্ষাৰ্থীক প্ৰদান কৰা সেই সকলোবোৰ শিক্ষণ অভিজ্ঞতাক সামৰি লোৱা হয় বুলি কয় তো কেনেকৈ সেই সামৰি লয় তো এইদৰে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ অধ্যয়নৰ পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ বাবে পাঠ্যক্ৰমক কাৰ্যকৰীভাৱে সংযোজিত কৰিব পাৰি যে সেই পাঠ্যক্ৰমক আমি গ্ৰহণ কৰাৰ সময়ত বিদ্যালয়ৰ ভিতৰত আৰু বাহিৰত আয়োজিত বিভিন্ন পাঠদান বা শিক্ষণ আমি কি কৰিব পাৰোঁ কাৰ্যকলাপৰ জৰিয়তে এজন শিক্ষাৰ্থীয়ে লাভ কৰা অভিজ্ঞতাক আমি সৰ্বমুঠ শৈক্ষিক লক্ষ্যত আমি উপনীত হ'ব পাৰোঁ তো ইয়াৰ সেইকাৰণে উদ্দেশ্য পূৰণৰ বাবে যিকোনো পাঠ্যক্ৰম প্ৰণয়ন কৰা হোৱাত দেখা যায় আৰু পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ বিধিসমূহ আমি দেখিবলৈ পাওঁ তো এই পদ্ধতিত কেৱল আমাৰ সমাজৰে নহয় কিন্তু শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ প্ৰয়োজনীয়তাও বিবেচনা কৰা হয় তো বিবেচনা কৰাৰ লগতে সমাজ বিজ্ঞানে এইখিনিও পায় যে বিভিন্ন গৱেষণামূলক অধ্যয়নৰ ফলাফলত পাঠ্যক্ৰমৰ যোনখিনি গঠন হয় সেইখিনি যথেষ্ট আমাৰ প্ৰভাৱ পেলায় তো যোনখিনি ডেফিনিশ্যনছ আমি এটা পঢ়িলোঁ তাত আমি প্ৰায় গম পালোঁ যে পৰিকল্পনাৰ কি যে যোনখিনি মেইন চাৰিটা আধাৰ আছে সেইখিনি আমি উদ্দেশ্য আছে সেইখিনি আমি চাৰিটা ভাগতে ভাগ কৰিব পাৰোঁ প্ৰথমটো হৈছে বিষয়বস্তু বা শিক্ষণৰ যোনখিনি সামগ্ৰী দ্বিতীয়টো হৈছে আমাৰ উদ্দেশ্যৰ পিছত আৰু শিক্ষণ কৌশল তাৰ লগত আমাৰ সেইটো হৈছে আমাৰ মূল্যায়ন ধন্যবাদ